Good evening and welcome to the June 4, 2024 City Council regular hybrid meeting. I'm Mayor Salim Neese. This evening's hybrid City Council meeting is being brought to you in person and by Zoom, and we're also broadcasting live on MITV Channel 21 and on the city's YouTube channel. Welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. Council members, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call, and City Clerk Andrea Larson, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Andral.
Here.
Councilmember Jacobson. Does not look like Councilmember Jacobson has joined us yet. Councilmember Reynolds.
I am here. Sorry.
Councilmember Weicker. Here. Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Here.
And Mayor Neese.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we have a quorum present. Please note that Councilmember Reynolds is attending remotely. And next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, if you joined us in council chambers, please stand and face the flag. If you've joined by Zoom, please turn off your video. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up on the agenda, we have a study session for AB 6484, the 2024 Community Survey results, and we welcome Communications Manager Mason
Excuse me,
Luvera.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Looks like we skipped agenda approval.
We have done that, absolutely. Okay, we now move to approval of tonight's agenda. If there's no questions, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Weinberg, seconded by Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson still has not joined the meeting. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Weicker. Aye. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that, motion passes, the agenda is approved, and now we are back to the study session for AB 6484, the 2024 Community Survey results, and we welcome Communications Manager Mason Luvera.
It's actually going to be me this evening, Mayor Neese. So
Okay.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Allie Speets, Chief of Administration. And tonight we are presenting the results of the 2024 Community Survey. So since 2004, the city has conducted a biennial community survey to track customer satisfaction with city services, to identify resident priorities, and to gather input on significant community issues. This survey adds value by creating a feedback loop that's helpful in identifying areas of concern with city services, in determining information gaps with the public that needs to be bridged, and in allocating resources during the biennial budget process. So now I'd like to introduce Ryan Murray. He's the Assistant Director of Community Research with ETC Institute, who is our consultant for the survey, and he will present the 2024 survey results.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. We appreciate you allowing us to present virtually. As was mentioned, I'm Ryan Murray, the Assistant Director of Community Research here at ETC Institute. We've been in business about 40 years or a little more than that, but for the last 35 years, our mission has really been to focus on helping municipal governments utilize statistically valid survey research to make better decisions. And so since 2006, we've surveyed about 1,000 communities in 49 states, more than 3 million people across the United States. And as you can see, we've got a pretty decent presence throughout the country, but also in that Pacific Northwest region where you all are located. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to present these results. Am I not starting my video? I apologize, I've got a prompt here. Is my screen being shared?
Sure is.
Great, thank you so much for confirmation. Back to where I was, it's always a pleasure to be able to provide some context for the purpose of these surveys as we see them. They're really an objective assessment of the delivery of your services to residents. And what that means is we're unbiased, or we're attempting to ask in an unbiased way how we've delivered or performed over the last couple of years in terms of the perceptions that residents have of the delivery of our services. And so one of the things that I always like to let folks know is that we know not all residents have a firsthand experience with all of the service items or all of the areas listed in the survey. And so some of the items are simply perceived notions or perceived understandings of how those services are being delivered. And some of these items can have kind of a snapshot in time feel, where if you've had a bad day, or if maybe a off-ramp was clogged or potentially closed on your way home, and you get home and find the survey, it could impact your responses. But what we do in aggregate, it gives us the ability to really analyze through that data, through those bad days or those instances, and really try to see a clearer picture through the aggregate results of the entire community, how we're performing. In addition to the objective assessment, we're tracking trends from prior surveys. We administered your 2018, 2022, and most recently the 2024 survey. I want to provide some contextualizations to the results using our regionally similarly sized communities and U.S. averages to provide some context for where you stand. And we're going to identify some areas for improvement to increase overall satisfaction, and that's an inherent design feature in the survey. So no matter how satisfaction or no matter how the emphasis or importance levels would have rated in this year's survey, we still would have identified some areas for improvement based inherently on the survey design. When we talk about survey itself and the methodology, it's important to note that it was a 5-page survey. It's the third survey conducted by our firm for ETC Institute, and it included many of the same questions that were asked in 2018 and 2022. We administer that survey online and by mail to a random sample of households in the community. We first mailed the survey to a random selection of households throughout the city, and then from there we follow up with that random selection of addresses. Each survey took approximately 15 to 20 minutes to complete on average. Most folks were in that 17-minute range during our online administration. And overall, we were able to complete 483 surveys. Those 483 surveys accurately match or closely describe the demographic breakdown of the actual city residents in the community, which helps provide that statistical validity along with the random sampling. The results of 483 completed surveys have a margin of error of about 4.5%, the 95% level of confidence. And what that means is 95 out of 100 times we conduct the survey and receive 483 randomly selected responses, we should receive these same results, plus or minus that margin of error of 4.5%, 95 out of 100 times. There will be those 5 instances where some of those other factors may come into play that could espouse those results plus or minus a little bit higher or lower than that 4.5%. When we talk about geographic distribution, I think it's really important just as much, or not maybe probably more so, but just as much as our demographic distribution. It's important to make sure that ETC Institute is balancing the sample both demographically and geographically, and we had a good group of responses or a good distribution of responses from throughout the island. When we talk about major findings, I hope these are some of the few things that you take away this evening. Residents still have a positive perception of the community, but results are down. And that's something we're seeing nationally, and we'll describe that and discuss some of that here in just a moment. The city continues to far exceed national benchmarks, and we're not alone in the downturn of those results. Nationally, core services and perceptions are down across the country, even in some of our communities that are performing at exceptionally high levels, like Mercer Island, year over year. Despite this, the city still continued to maintain a very high overall rating, and we'll see some of those comparisons in our benchmarking. And our top priority for improvement is the same as 2022 based on the important satisfaction analysis, and that's really a focus on efforts by the city to regulate development on the island. There's a little bit more to that particular item. I reviewed your 2022 results, reviewed the 24 results. When we talk about important satisfaction, when we get there, we'll see a reason why this item tends or will probably tend to continue to be one of our higher rated items on the important satisfaction analysis moving forward. When we talk about perceptions, it's important to provide that context. And so I want to provide some trends, and in the following slide, I'll show you how we compare to some of those regional like-sized communities and national averages. And what we're seeing here is basically our perceptions of Mercer Island questions. The areas that I've signified or identified with those downward arrows are those areas where we saw significant differences of plus 4.5 percentage points or more. And what that would constitute is a significant change in those results. So anything exceeding our margin of error would be constituted as a significant change in those results. And we see a few changes down there towards the bottom. Again, the city's not experiencing these downturns in isolation. We've seen a lot of high-performing organizations see these similar downturns. The key piece to understand is that contextualization. And so while we don't have contextualization or comparisons for each one of those items in the previous chart, we have comparisons for many of them. And as you can see, is this island is a place to live, raise children, overall feeling of safety in the city. We're not even close to those Northwest under 30 or US averages. It's really just unfair how far and above the city of Mercer Island is performing in some of those instances. We're also significantly above the US average in all of the other areas listed, the 3 items below that, the overall quality of services, and we're still significantly above all 3 of those comparisons, even one of the more difficult ones, which is our Northwest regional average. Even as a place to retire and as an inclusive community, we saw in previous slides a little bit of a downturn in some of those results. But when we contextualize those results, we again understand that even though we saw a slight downturn in our results, other communities are experiencing these same issues nationwide. When we talk about additional perceptions, it's important to note that while there have been some changes, generally, folks think that the community is still headed in the right direction. A majority of residents still think the government is doing an excellent or good job overall for the vast majority of folks. And when we talk about how you rate this job the city of Mercer Island is doing to use tax dollars, we also see a bulk or a majority of our respondents in those excellent and good categories, with a little bit more in the fair in this particular instance. We then asked respondents if they think the city provides too many, too few, or about the right amount of government services, and we're still right there in that about a right amount area. It was a decrease of about 4 points, but just not quite there to be completely significant. So this is kind of a sampling change versus an actual significant change in the perceptions of respondents. There is a slight uptick of respondents who said too few services, but still below that 1 in 5 number there, where a vast majority, 8 out of 10, are saying we're doing the right amount. When we do benchmarking, I like to kind of dig into this, especially when communities perform well. I think it's always interesting, and in your full report, you'll see a little bit more of this. But the 2024 survey contained almost 50 areas that were comparable to our database. Our national average is based on a survey administered last summer to over 10,000 residents in the United States. Our Northwest regional average has about 1,200 responses in it, and our under 30K average, which is an under 30,000 population type average, has about 2,500 responses. Again, significant differences are those that exceed the margin of error of about 5% or 4.5%. When we talk about comparative averages, both to the US and under 30 population, here's some of our comparative advantages. Some of the areas where we rated significantly above the average. When we talk about the US average, you rated above the US average in 42 of the 46 areas, or 91% of them. So I definitely couldn't list them all here, but they are in your report. And when we talk about significantly over the average, we're significantly over the average, or that 4.5 percentage points or more, in 39 of the 46 areas, or 85%. There are some comparative disadvantages. We talk about adequacy of street lighting, enforcement to clean up of junk and debris, condition of bicycle infrastructure. But we're only under the average in 4 of the 46 areas for the US average, and only significantly under the average in 2 of those areas. When we talk about that under 30K population average, we're under in 0 of the 46 areas significantly that we were able to assess. As you can see there, we're down in just a few items, but there was no significant differences. When we talk about opportunities for improvement, we're strictly talking about our important satisfaction analysis. If any of you saw the survey, what we want to do is assess satisfaction and then follow up with an emphasis question. The permitting, so some of the problems with this particular question is efforts by the city to regulate development on the island. And it's not a problem with the question, but it's a problem with the eye of the beholder and how residents perceive that. And it's very similar, and I think that's a better example to use code enforcement. You might be a person who thinks that your neighbor's not in compliance with city code. You might call the city, and the city might say, hey, yeah, he's out of code, and then you get the resolution that you prefer. But that neighbor probably didn't get the resolution that they would have appreciated. And so along with this line, we find that residents either sometimes misunderstand, or maybe a development isn't quite what they wanted or isn't quite what they desired. And sometimes we can see elevated levels of dissatisfaction in those areas. You might also be looking at the permitting and inspection services. That had relatively elevated levels of dissatisfaction as well, but 31.5% of respondents indicated that they don't know about that service. So only about 70% of our respondents asked that. So most respondents don't have a true understanding of some of our permitting and inspection services. That's very similar to some of our regulation and development. The follow-up question was to ask which services in the previous list do you think are most important for us to focus on over the next 2 years? In the past, we consulted with clients on focusing on the areas that were the lowest levels of satisfaction. In the previous slide, we noticed that the efforts by the city to regulate development on the island was one of the lowest levels of overall satisfaction. But when we talk about some of the other items, we see permitting and inspection relatively low on the importance list. So we want to balance both of these factors equally. And what we found from these results in 2024 is that efforts by the city to regulate development on the island was the #1 priority for them based on the satisfaction and importance ratings. And so what this does is weighs both components equally, the satisfaction and importance. And based on items that were below average satisfaction and above average importance, they find their way to the top of these lists. The problem with this particular analysis for the city of Mercer Island is that you're performing too well in some of your other categories on the survey. And so when we look at items towards the bottom, customer service, fire and emergency medical services, communication, all the way up to police services, parks, and all the way up to maintenance of city streets and rights of ways, we have relatively high levels of satisfaction. And because the levels of service are so high in the community, the relative importance rankings rank low. While it's still very important for most residents that you continue to maintain city parks, trails, and open space, it didn't receive its high share of the overall importance rankings or as high of a share to some of the other items because it's being served so well. Now, this particular instance does show city parks, trails, and open space as the most important item, but some of our other items on our list receive relatively high importance rankings, but significantly lower satisfaction rankings. And so the city of Mercer Island will likely continue to see a couple of these items that we're seeing at the top now, permitting, development, continuing to be top priorities, primarily because the core services that most residents have firsthand knowledge of or feel on a daily basis are being served at such a high level that the importance levels will remain relatively low. And if they don't, the satisfaction numbers will remain significantly higher than some of the other items on the survey. And so I know that's a little bit ambiguous for this particular presentation, but what I'm trying to suggest is that the city's performing exceptionally well in many key areas, which will continue to highlight a couple of those tertiary areas, those areas that not all residents have firsthand knowledge of, and that'll kind of continue to boost those towards the top. One of the main areas that we had in terms of development or permitting inspection services, the only other really area where we had high levels of prioritization or high levels of important satisfaction ratings was in our transportation section. It was really about availability of parking for the most part. I found this to be very interesting. Also, access to public transportation, availability of safe biking and safe walking facilities. And what I thought was very interesting is that it wasn't really commuter travel that folks were most concerned with. It seemed to be local, regional, or how can we commute in town center. So there was just some interesting items there, but these seem to be some of the higher levels of important satisfaction ratings that we received outside of our major categories of service. When we talk about some additional high priority items, city's overall efforts to prevent crime received relatively high ratings. It's just very important for respondents. In communication, we had a couple of items continuing to see level of public involvement and local decision making, which we see in communities across the country. Streets and infrastructure was primarily related to street lighting, condition of our bicycle infrastructure. And code enforcement was mainly about the enforcement of cleanup of junk and debris on private property, which sometimes ebbs and flows in warmer months and kind of flows out again in those colder months. So those are some of our additional high priority items. The full methodology and all of the important satisfaction tables can be found in your full report, but I did want to highlight just a few of these items, and I really wanted to take just a moment on the important satisfaction this year to let you all know how well you're performing and why that might impact your analysis moving forward. In summary, residents have an extremely positive perception of the city. I think that's going to hold true regardless of how some of the other ratings throughout the country begin to shift. You might see some downturns, but your overall rating will remain high and will likely continue to remain higher than our regional comparisons that we could provide. The community continues to far exceed those comparisons, which is really important to note. We might not find satisfaction as elected leaders or administrative staff in the city with a 55% level of satisfaction in a given area. But when we know the national average hovers around 30, we're performing relatively well even though. And our top priority for improvement remains from last time. It's efforts to regulate development on the island. Sometimes I would suggest education. Other times I would suggest some other items. But for your community, most likely we should continue to educate on redevelopment or development in the community. but it will likely always be a contentious issue in a community that has a landmass issue or you can't annex anything. So that's always going to kind of be one of those areas where you might see some difficulties. But other than that, the community performed extremely well. And I know I've gone a little bit long, so I apologize, but I'll take any questions. I'll do my best to answer anything I can on the call this evening.
Okay. Well, thank you for that presentation. Ally, is there anything else from your end? Okay, I'll open it up to questions from council. Councilmember Anderall.
Trying to put my microphone on and take my hand down. Thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it. Can you zoom back to the slide with the blue and yellow bars that had the down arrows on it?
Yeah. Was it this one?
Oh, you're not sharing right now.
I apologize. I think must have been.
Mr. Mayor, and Ryan, do you have access to your video, your actual camera?
Sure.
I'd say we're not getting a picture of you. There we go.
So the first item that has a down arrow, overall quality of services provided by the city of Mercer Island, that seems to be duplicative of the item immediately above it.
That's a typo on my part. I apologize.
Is
There were
that-
some last minute edits this evening. I failed to catch that.
Which one is the right one?
Give me just a moment. I will determine that. This is overall feeling of safety in the city. That is the item.
Okay. Good, yeah, I looked at the slide for long enough while you had it up on the screen that kind of jumped out at me. Mr. Mayor, I have some other questions, but other
No,
people
carry
have.
on.
Oh,
But-
okay. So the other question that I have, it's interesting to me, maybe you can give a little bit of a deeper dive on it, is the fairly high level of dissatisfaction with the level of public involvement in decision-making. And what do you perceive that to be? Because, I mean, people are overall happy with the decisions that are being made. So is it just kind of like some degree of public perception that they would like to have elections on some important issues that we don't typically have elections on, or, the difference between direct democracy and representative democracy? What do you know about that?
That is one I've done focus groups on. I've done study groups. I've done follow-up surveys on communication. I'm an elected official in my own community. I serve as an alderman, which is essentially a council member. What I've determined over the last 15 years of doing this is it's more of folks are not going to be happy with their level of involvement until you take the council meetings on a roadshow. And until you start showing up at front doors and asking specific questions of individual residents. And I hate to put it like that, but there is this sense that no matter what communities do to ensure that folks can participate virtually via social media, they can write in emails to ask questions or bother staff during the day, or maybe not bother, but ask questions of staff during the day. There is almost no amount of engagement and communication that seems to suffice or satisfy that need for the level of public involvement in local decision making. The problem exists in the fact that we're not participating in these democracies as much as we used to in the past. The problem exists with the fact that this is a random sampling exercise. We know our council chambers are not always packed full. And so when we're broadly distributing these surveys to the wider community, we're finally giving those folks that really have no interest in our council meetings the opportunity to respond. I feel like as though they're giving us that response. Hey, I'm dissatisfied. I didn't have an opportunity to provide my input. Now, that's kind of a jaded way to look at things potentially. But through my experience, both as a consultant, as a elected official myself, and as a resident, having participated in many public meetings in my own community, it does seem like this instance where unless we're bringing these meetings to their front doors, we're always going to struggle with some of these communication engagement areas.
So this is not an uncommon dissatisfaction point in other communities?
No, it's not really. Sometimes what we'll see as a concern is effectiveness of communication. But when it comes specifically to the item of my involvement or level of public involvement in local decision making, I see it everywhere. And one thing that I know about a lot of the communities I work with is that when we do big things or we make huge decisions, there's frequently many public engagement opportunities for that. And the idea that we have the public engagement activities, we request or ask of staff to participate or manage or throw those events, and then participation wanes, or it's kind of the revolving door of the frequent flyers that we see every meeting. It's disappointing, but I think the results are a direct reflection of some of that in our communities.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, this is a question perhaps for Jeff Thomas or Jesse Bond more than Mr. Murray. I'm curious about the low rankings for enforcing cleanup of junk and debris on private property. Is that a problem? I've never seen that to be a problem. I'm just curious if we get many complaints like that. I imagine if I made a complaint and it wasn't resolved, I'd be annoyed, but I just don't know if we get complaints.
Yeah, so that's actually, I was a little surprised to see that here on this slide. We get very, very few complaints about junk and debris on private property. One specifically that I'm aware of in probably the last 2+ years anyway. So it's something I plan on looking into a little bit further into our data at City Hall, and be happy to report back to council on that to see what the numbers say within our permit and code compliance tracking system.
And in general, from what I understand, the enforcement on anything like this doesn't happen unless there's a complaint. Is it safe to assume that if you got a complaint, you would look into it?
Our code compliance system is complaint driven. So if we don't receive a complaint, we don't have the time or the resources to be driving the island looking for complaints ourselves. We don't generate complaints ourselves. It is a complaint driven system
But you do respond when you do get complaints. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I know that one had 40% don't know, which seemed extraordinarily high. And I'm going to take that to mean a lot of people have not had to make a complaint. So that something's going okay.
Yes. And so there's a lot of context that surrounds all these results. This particular instance is telling me immediately that only 6 out of 10 respondents provided a response. When you get into that type of mind frame or that type of framing in terms of responses, what you're really seeing is a heightened view of some of probably the most heated or at least polarizing opinions of those particular services. And when we get into the actual important satisfaction analysis of it, there were only a few items rated. While the important satisfaction analysis should suggest that all of the items have relatively high levels of importance, what we should really be looking at is the tabular data, understanding how big the issue technically is or seriously is in comparison to some of the other items. Now, this is something we should be mindful of, but it's definitely not a driving factor, and majority of residents didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Okay. I have one additional question when it's my turn, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize, I can't recall if I saw this. The demographic questions are interesting. Were those cross-tabbed with what the actual demographics were to determine if they're representative?
We do that when processing the results. We could go through some of that to see, but within your survey here, we've got many questions, including income, gender. 18 is one that we can compare to Census Bureau along with 17. 16 can be misleading. We must understand it's the age of the respondent, not the actual age of all the household members. And then years lived in the city of Mercer Island is kind of a distribution game where we want to make sure we're distributing responses through all those categories. So we're monitoring all these questions as the surveys are being administered. And it's really important for us to focus on specifically 17 and 18, as well as 20, because females will tend to respond to surveys like this a little bit higher frequency than males.
And you're saying you've already done that comparison, but it's not in the report, is that correct?
We do the comparison to make sure that the sampling is correct, yes, but it's all here in the report. The exact comparisons aren't in the report, but the Census Bureau statistics were compared by ETC and Stu before finalizing the database.
I'll look at that a little bit more carefully, but I take it you thought it was reasonably representative overall, I take it.
Yes, everything was within our 4.5% margin of error for the race ethnicity factors. The gender factor with the additional items, anytime the question isn't just like census, it does throw those off, but we're always looking for closeness. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Thanks. Maybe I can bring us home here. Obviously, these numbers are, are strong. But I think we'd be remiss if we don't thank the folks that do all the work that get these numbers. And Ryan, I don't mean the survey collectors. I mean the city staff. I think it's, so much of what is reflected in this survey is excellent staff work. So I think it's important that we recognize that and say thanks, and sort of keep that in mind as we have ongoing conversations about staff facilities and compensation, things of that nature. There's a lot to be proud of, I think, for the 7 of us sitting up here. And I think we should just take a second to appreciate the folks that do all this work every day.
Agreed.
Thank you for that. An important point. Councilmember Weinberg.
I just wanted to echo what Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum was saying about we should be very proud of these numbers, that having people that are very happy on the island and that feel the city's going in the right direction says a lot to the hard work of the staff and the tough decisions that we have as a council have had to make over the past several years. I guess one question I had was about the response rate. We have 483 responses. I didn't see in the report how many were actually sent out. Was that 483 out of 2,000 mailings or 4,000 mailings? Or?
Yeah, so just over to 20%, excuse me. Yep.
So 20% response rate. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Weinberg. Not seeing anything else. Councilmember Weicker.
One final quick question. Following Dave's point on this list of services and how we beat the national average, we're only down on 3 of those items, and the lowest ranked one is city street lighting, which I would argue a lot of people don't want, and the survey respondents who thought we were not adequately providing street lighting. I just want to turn to Jeff Thomas and let him speak a minute about our street lighting and how we're LED and careful about where we put them, given all the impacts to wildlife and neighborhoods and views and all of that. So Jeff, do you want to speak to our lowest ranked item on the survey? Not to put you on the spot, but I think we knocked it out of the park. Thank you, city staff, but that's the one spot where I think we can agree we don't all want more street lighting.
Councilmember Waker, I think that question is more appropriately directed to our Chief of Operations, Jason Kittner, but I'm not sure that he has joined the meeting yet.
Whoever wants to take it. I just think it's an interesting point with interesting results and probably a little bit of controversy.
Actually, Jason is here. There you go. Jason, did you catch the question about street lighting?
If I heard the very end of it, if you could just repeat it, and I'll happy to answer street lighting questions.
I just want to note that we have an amazing city and amazing staff doing great work, and the lowest ranked item on this survey result is the adequacy of city street lighting is down 10% compared to the national average. And I don't think that's a big deal at all, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit and talk about all the good stuff we are doing around street lighting and why we don't do more of it.
Yeah, so Jason Kittner, Chief of Operations, is a great question. Our lighting arrangement for the island can be a little bit unique at times, depending on the ownership of the lights, where the lights are located, coordination with other improvement projects. I will say we do have some upcoming projects scheduled for construction actually later this year that are actually going to enhance and improve lighting, expand our lighting. And so it is a consideration with our transportation projects that we look at. It's not a one size fits all. We are very particular about light blight and the impacts to the surrounding areas, as well as improving the pedestrian corridor and transportation corridor as well. So I think the short answer is your engineering team is actively looking at it. It's specific to the project at hand. And as I said, we have some upcoming projects actually on the near horizon that are actually going to add additional lighting to the town center as well. So it's something that is being actively pursued and discussed, but again, it's a sort of project by project basis, not a one size fits all.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right, Council, I'm not seeing anything else. We're going to move on to our next item, which is the City Manager's report. And we welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening again, and Casey Thompson is in the background. There she is, helping me with the screen share. Tonight is June 4th. Hard to believe, we're already at the midpoint of the year. Just a quick look at the calendar coming up. City Council, your next council meeting is June 18th. And we have a lot of board and commission meetings this month, so I've laid them all out I'll just remind everyone that the agendas and the meeting dates are all published on our website at the link at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. Before I dive into the comprehensive plan update, I just wanted to mention that in previous city manager reports, I've been doing multiple slides updating you, council, and the community on the SPU water supply pipeline repair. We have a presentation later this evening that will cover that in detail, so I'm omitting it from this deck. Switching subjects, wanted to make sure you are aware of where we are in the comprehensive plan update process. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the comp plan last week. We had a handful of people testifying and about a dozen written comments received. The Planning Commission is spending 2 meetings in June at least working through their review in preparation to hand that off to you, City Council. We plan to be in front of you with that handoff in July, and then you will begin really the bulk of your work this fall in September. We have a Let's Talk page on the comprehensive plan. We'll continue to receive public comments throughout the process, so if anyone would like to share any thoughts, that's the place to go. That is also where we post progress updates and revised drafts and all those good things. All right, next slide, please. Switching topics to capital project update. As you know, the Luther Burbank Boiler Building is undergoing a pretty significant renovation, focusing on a seismic retrofit, reinforcing that very tall chimney, and renovating the restrooms. So I'd like to check in with you and let you know where we're at. We have the scaffolding up and the rebar has been installed inside that chimney in preparation for the new concrete. The formwork has been completed for casting a concrete roof, a concrete roof beam, which will connect that chimney to the ceiling and wall of the building. That's all part of the seismic work we're doing. The concrete floor was poured last week, and our project manager, Paul West, is very excited about it. It looks fantastic. And then we'll be putting the steel in for the new mezzanine starting this week. So we're not at a place where the construction site is open for tours, but when we get there, Council, I'd be happy to take you down and show you all the work we've been doing. And we're getting close. Speaking of Luther Burbank, it's a very active construction park with lots of construction right now. We are working on the resurfacing of the tennis courts. We'll be converting those tennis courts to 8 pickleball courts. Our contractor, Field Turf, mobilized to the site last week, working on all of the pre-construction activities. We'll be doing our excavation and demolition work this week, and more coming. I'll just remind you that while these courts are down, we have put striped temporary pickleball courts at Island Crest Park. Not quite as big as Luther Burbank, but we hope that'll relieve the pressure a little bit through the summer. We are anticipating this project will be done at the end of August. Next slide, please. I also wanted to tell you there's been some pretty important milestones from King County on their sewer interceptor project work. Most of the north end of Mercer Island over the last, 2 years has been under construction for sewer upgrades. Some major improvements are happening at facilities that we use. First of all, the equipment, all of the equipment that was being stored and materials from the boat launch parking lot has been removed, and they've repaved a large section just in time for our summer season. King County also completed their asphalt paving at the Shorewood Drive 90th Place intersection. That's great news. And then we anticipate the sections of I-90 trail that are still closed. Work will be completed on those very soon, and the trail will be reopening. So we'll keep you posted as things wrap up in areas that were heavily impacted by this important utility project. Next slide, please. We're headed into our very, very, very busy summer season, so we wanted to make sure we got these important dates out to you again. Just a reminder that we're hosting a Pride in the Park event Saturday, June 15th from 2 to 5 at Mercerdale Park. Juneteenth event on Wednesday, June 19th, 12 to 4, also at Mercerdale Park. Switching subjects just a little bit, we have a lot of restoration events planned throughout the summer. every Saturday in June, in fact. The next opportunity is this Saturday, June 8th at 1 o'clock at First Hill. That's on the north end of the island, First Hill Park. We'll be spreading mulch and doing weed removal. Looks like we left off the web link on this note, but I'll just let you know all these events are published on our website, and we do invite you to register in advance. Next slide, please. The Friends of Mercer Island reached out and asked me to do a promotion of their book sale, which we are absolutely happy to do. Today through June 10th, they are hosting a mini sale at the library. They're selling gently used books and media during open library hours. All of the proceeds from these sales goes to support the library program. So pop on by and support the Friends of the Library. Next slide, please. All right, a handful of good news slides. I wanted to give a huge shout out to the Public Works team. They secured a really important grant, which actually we'll talk a little bit more later tonight when we discuss the Transportation Improvement Plan. Council, you may be aware that on the horizon in 2026 and 2027, we will be updating our pedestrian and bicycle facilities plan. That's going to be a major plan update, very comprehensive and thorough. The estimated cost for that planning work over that 2-year period is around $400,000, and I'm really excited to report that we received a grant for $320,000, so 80% of that planning cost. Only 2 cities in Washington received these grant funds. Really proud that Mercer Island was successful, and we look forward to that planning project. Next slide, please. Thrift shop. They had an absolutely banner sale on Memorial Day. That picture on the slide there is the line ahead of opening day. Council, you may be aware that on holidays we often run a special sale, and we had a lot of fun with this one. We brought in a little over $17,000 in total sales on Memorial Day. So congratulations to the thrift shop, and none of this would be possible without all the volunteers working behind the scene to support our operation and all the community members that donate. Thank you very much. Next slide. All right, City Council, it is the final City Council meeting for Police Chief Ed Holmes, and I know he's really disappointed about that. Chief Holmes has been with the City of Mercer Island for over 30 years and has served as our police chief for 18 of those years. Not enough time tonight to go over all of his accomplishments, and I know we're all looking forward to his official farewell party in a couple of weeks. But I would be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to say thank you for your service, Ed. You will be dearly missed, and we wish you well on your next chapter of life. However, you still have 2 weeks to work, so don't get too excited about that. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I understand the council may have some thoughts they wanted to share on Ed's last council meeting, so I will turn the floor back to you.
I'm going to guess that they will, and thank you for that. Let me just start quickly. Chief Holmes, I can't thank you enough for your 30 years of service to Mercer Island. You know, the years that I've spent with you while I've been on council as council member and deputy mayor and mayor, I just can't thank you enough for the support, the mentoring, the tutelage that you've provided me and other council members. You are what makes this community great, and you're going to be deeply missed. I tweeted out when I got wind of your retirement announcement, and I heard from so many other mayors of other cities how esteemed and high regard that they held you, and what a challenge that they said it would be to fill your shoes. And we know that that's going to be a challenge, but I think what we are here to do tonight is say thank you for your decades of service on behalf of the council and for the community. You've been such a huge part of this city. And I'll turn it over to council. I'll go with Wendy. We'll just go down the line.
I was going to say I get to go first. Wow, Chief, I just can't thank you enough. I've turned to you so many times for different questions, different issues, and you've seen this community through so many ups and downs, and I've heard from other police chiefs and city leadership throughout the region what a force you've been for good, for policing and all the chaos we've had in policing in the last couple of years. You've been a stalwart leader, not just for this community, but for our region, and down in Olympia too. So your service has gone above and beyond, anything I ever imagined a police chief could do. And I personally like you. It's fun to talk to you. It's fun to call you. It's fun to hear from you. And it's fun to hear about your kids and hear about your retirement plans. And I'm just going to miss having you around. And I just so appreciate your steady leadership through all the good and bad and ugly that comes with your job and with leading your team through all of that in our community, in our region, and through changing laws and respect for the force or not. And I just really respect you and the profession, everything that you've done for us and for me personally over the years, and I'm going to miss you. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
So plus one to that, and I think what comes to mind when I think about my interactions with not just Chief Holmes, but with the whole department that he's helped to lead and to shape over the decades is care and compassion. And I want to share an anecdote of a couple of years ago. There was a citizen that sent a photo to the city council saying that while she was biking on East Mercer Way, a car passed too close to her, and she indicated her, called out to the car and said, "Hey, that was too close." The car actually stopped, and somebody from inside the car made a rude gesture out the window and then sped off. She took a photo of the car and sent that car to us. And the police department, there are many ways they could have handled this because they had a photo of the license plate, and so they could have, tracked down the person and arrested them. But what the police department did, and I don't think it was a police chief directly who did this, but the officers that he had trained knew to find out what's going on. Do they recognize from the license plate number who it was? Can they figure out who in the household it was? They were able to actually call the household, talk to the person that ended up being a parent of the driver, and being able to explain to the parent, this is what we saw happen, this is the photo that we got. The issue got resolved within that household as a parental discipline issue without anybody getting arrested, without any money being spent, and we were able to completely de-escalate the issue without any permanent damage to anyone's record, and the behavior changed, right? That the individual who was driving the car probably did not do that anymore. That's the kind of compassionate care that our police department can deliver because of the fact that we think about the people involved and about changing the behavior and not just making an arrest or making an entry. And I trace that directly back to the chief's leadership and your background from working in the schools and from working with the community for all these years. And we're going to miss you. They're big shoes to fill.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderl.
Thanks. Well, Ed, we're going to miss you a lot. You've just been amazing to work with. I think I've been on council for 5 years, and it's just flown by. Most of that time, other than my city council job, I've been retired, and so I constantly find myself texting Ed on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then quickly following up with an, "I'm sorry, this can wait until Monday," and he has never failed to get back to me on that day. Just amazing. A little anecdote of my own, but when I was a newbie green city council person, Ashley and Olivia, the leaders of Moms for Safe Mercer Island, contacted me and said, we'd like to talk to you about issues on the island and, policing and safety and everything else. And I said, sure, and set up the meeting at Starbucks. And a couple of hours before, I thought, geez, maybe I better talk to somebody in the police department before I go to this meeting, because I don't really know that much. And I called Ed and got him, and I said, this is what's going on. And he immediately said, well, do you want me to go with you? And they brought their kids to the meeting, and it was just a wonderful intro and just a great dialogue, far superior than I could have handled on my own. So, and that's just, one instance in probably 10,000 of Ed's dedication to the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacobson.
Well, Chief, I'm really sorry that I'm not there to express my appreciation and approbation for all that you've done for Mercer Island personally. But please don't take that as any diminution of how I feel. Yours has been a job not only well done, extraordinarily well done, and you've you've set a tone on Mercer Island that, that people have confidence in the police department, and they have confidence in that public safety is being performed as well as it very possibly can, under not necessarily ideal circumstances, being a small island and all the other things we all know about. I join my colleagues in thanking you for your service and wishing you as we used to say in the Navy, fair winds and following seas. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, Chief, I just want to repeat my thanks as well. We had a presentation this evening on the community survey. One of the things that we were marked outstanding as was Mercer Island being a safe community, and you and your team are a big part of that. And so we all owe you a debt of gratitude on that. I'll also note that this is a time nationally where police don't always get all the respect they deserve and all the public support. It's really hard to find somebody in this island that does not support the Mercer Island Police Department and think that you're doing just a fabulous job. With a few exceptions, you could probably count on one hand, maybe even one finger. You're duly respected by everybody and honored and appreciated, and you're going to be sorely missed.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, it's hard to follow that, but I certainly agree. Ed, I think you're a role model to many folks, and I can say, you welcomed me onto the council and have given me advice on a lot of things, both I would say policing and the stress that can be on people in public positions. And I'll share a quick story. A few weeks ago, something happened, and I forget exactly what it was, but I was walking out to the parking lot, and Ed chased me down. And normally, a police officer chasing you in the parking lot is not what you're looking for. But Ed was like, "Hey, Dave, I just want to follow up with you here and give you a little thought." And that really stuck with me. It was something that had been bothering me, and Ed sort of gave me a different perspective, and I appreciate that. And I think one thing that makes you unique is that you have that ability to see different people's perspectives, and that's hard. But I want to say thanks on a personal level. I think anyone who's had to call the police has seen the impact that your leadership has had on that department. A lot more to say, but I just want to say thank you on behalf of our community, and you'll be missed for sure, but I think your impact will live on well past the next 2 weeks.
All right, stay tuned. More to come in the retirement party. Our next item of business is appearances, which is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the City Council on any item except items requiring a public hearing or quasi-judicial matters or campaign-related matters. I'll note that there are 3 public hearings later this evening regarding ordinance number 24C07, 24C08, and the 2025 through 2030 6-year transportation improvement program. If you're speaking regarding any of those topics, I'll ask you to hold your comments until the correct public hearing. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for public appearances tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Tonight's agenda will include in-person public appearances and remote public appearances via Zoom. Individuals wishing to address the council may do so in person or by Zoom or telephone, provided they register with the City Clerk by 4 p.m. today. When it's your turn to speak, you'll be called by name. Remarks must be addressed to the council as a whole and not to individual council or staff members. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks or who becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the City Council may be requested to leave the meeting. Please speak audibly. State your name and city of residence for the record. There'll be a timer on the screen. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. When your time is ended, I'll thank you for your comments and move to the next item or next speaker or item of business. City Clerk, please call the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first speaker tonight will be Tracy Drinkwater.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. It's nice to be here and see all of you and coincide with Chief Holmes' last meeting. My name is Tracy Drinkwater, and this is my 24th year of residence on Mercer Island. In the past few years, I became increasingly frustrated by the permissiveness of bigger and louder fireworks on the island. It was truly mind-boggling, the noise and pollution, not to mention the fire risk and injury risk that was allowed to some extent by legal fireworks, but especially by outrageous private fireworks displays. In 2022, I wrote to one of you about how nightmarish a 4th of July we experienced at our house for our family and our dog. My daughter has autism and is very sensitive to noise, but the noise level was so high that it caused our whole household to feel a very high level of anxiety. Some neighbors had stepped up their game with illegal fireworks being lit off on our block, and it felt like a war zone right outside our windows. I could see city-grade fireworks outside my bedroom window. The neighborhood was a mess the next morning with debris. We should be able to stay home from a fireworks show and have it be our choice to attend. I didn't call the police at that time because I didn't think they would have the bandwidth or ability to stop it without them being banned in our city limits. And I learned around that time that an ordinance needed to be passed more than a year ahead of time to take effect. Then again, the next year, I was similarly frustrated that an ordinance hadn't passed, and we had a very similar experience. Then about a month later, in August of 2023, we had a worse than 4th of July night, and I'd had enough. At about 11:25 p.m., the sound of multiple explosions really did sound like a war zone. This caused my family extreme anxiety, and we didn't know what it was. It wasn't July 4th or New Year's Eve. We had much rage when we realized that it was a private fireworks show in Lake Washington right off of the island, and it had been approved by this body. And I had called the police that evening and sent a letter to this council along with the city manager and the chief of police expressing our family's frustration. Please don't do that again. But I did appreciate the response that we got. But the reason I'm here is that I've recently learned that you passed an ordinance to ban fireworks on the island, which would take effect in 2025. Thank you. And thank you to, I believe it is the fire department that banned fireworks this year because of our water issue. And I'm just thrilled. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But in addition to that, I would really like to encourage you, as our hope is that it will be well advertised, well enforced, so that we don't have a lot of the same issue we had with illegal fireworks before. There could be illegal fireworks again. And if people don't know more about this ordinance and the risks that it imposes, not only to our island for fire reasons, but to all of our veterans, our people with autism and other sensory issues
Thank you.
and sensitivity.
Our next speaker tonight is Dan Thompson.
Good evening. My name is Dan Thompson. I'm a Mercer Island resident. I was happy and impressed to see the results from the survey, especially when I think about where this council started in 2020 and the city manager. I mean, that's really impressive. However, forever, the highest priority for the citizens has been regulating development. And to have it be the lowest approval rating is really concerning. It isn't due to code enforcement, as was speculated. We know that. There's not very many code enforcement complaints that way. What we've had is we've had kind of a bad run that goes into a lack of citizen involvement that is driving both of those disappointing results. We've had the development code docket last year, the Boys and Girls Club subdivision, the way the park zone was rolled out. Likely we have a very good Parks Commission, and kudos to the city manager for forming that. And now we have the comp plan, and we also have a Herzl development that, to me, looks like a bait and switch. I don't think things are going to get better when the citizens see the scale of the Tsinghua, which it isn't really your fault. It was the prior code. So we have to think about that. The issue I want to bring up is the comprehensive plan. I've spoken to you before. Not to correct Jesse, but there are actually 7 written comments. 2 were mine. 1 was from a citizen just supporting mine. And 2 were from Matt Goldbach and John Hall. And the only person to speak was Matt Goldbach. So there was effectively 0 citizen participation in probably the most important legal proceeding that you can have. Now, my concern right now is how are we going to get this done in 2024? The Planning Commission and the Planning Department are continuing to amend the plan. They're going to do it tomorrow. They're calling them motions based on public comments, but they're not. We're not going to get this back until close to July 4th, and then we start the summer. We have the 2024 comp plan docket. We have the 2025 that will be coming up. We have a bunch of issues. How is this council going to put in place a process that completely rewrites the comprehensive plan that was so bad, led to their reconstitution, and involve the citizens by the end of 2024? I don't see it. I don't see it happening. I haven't seen the process. It's just ridiculous that the Planning Commission keeps dithering and doing these pointless amendments to a draft that is dead on arrival. So I hope that you think about that and how we're going to accomplish this. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so there's no further speakers. We now move to our next item of business, or approval of the consent agenda. Consent agenda contains AB 6485, the May 17, 2024 payroll certification, certification of claims for May 17 and 24, 2024, City Council regular hybrid meeting minutes of May 21, 2024, AB 6486, Pride Month Proclamation number 334, AB 6487, Juneteenth Proclamation number 335. Council, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Weinberg, seconded by Councilmember Anderall. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
And Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Consent agenda passes. Our first item of regular business is AB 6490, which is the AWC Business Meeting Voting Delegate. Council, we need to select voting delegates to attend the AWC Business Meeting in June, and we can appoint up to 3 voting delegates. Does anybody have any questions about this? Don't see any. Councilmember Weinberg has expressed interest, and myself and Councilmember Weicker will also be in attendance. So council, if there's any concerns about appointing myself, Councilmember Weicker, Weinberg is the voting delegates at the AWC meeting in June. And I'm guessing nobody has any objection to that. So I'll call for a motion to appoint Councilmembers Weicker, Weinberg, Mayor Neese as the voting delegates at the AWC 2024 business meeting in June.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Anderall, seconded by Councilmember Weicker. Not seeing any discussion. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
And Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum. Looks like Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum has stepped away.
Okay, motion passes. Our next item of regular business is AB 6488, an ordinance to adopt interim regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining, which will begin our first public hearing of the evening on ordinance number 24C07. This public hearing is now open as of 6:03 p.m. Individuals who registered with the city clerk's office before 4 p.m. today may make public comment on this agenda item. You'll be called by name when it's your turn to speak. Please speak audibly, state your name and city of residence for the record. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. City Clerk, is there anyone signed up for public comment that wishes to address council?
Mr. Mayor, there was no one who signed up to speak during this public hearing.
Okay, as there's no further testimony this evening, the public portion of this hearing is closed as of 6:03 p.m. And we welcome CPD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. Joining me here is Molly McGuire, one of our planners in the department. We've got a short slide deck for you. Council will recall just before we get started here that this was a subject that was discussed at your March 1st planning session. And we came back on April 2nd and provided a plan for City Council that you directed us to go ahead and execute. And tonight is the magic moment when we're here with the interim regulations. So with that, Molly's going to share her screen and walk you through about a half dozen slides, and then we'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you. All right. So I'll start with a little bit of background. This ordinance came about because the Mercer Island City Code currently lacks regulations for temporary uses and structures, which results in a gap in allowed and regulated uses that are not considered to be permanent. The standards for permanent development in the MICC don't align with applications for uses and standards that are intended to be temporary, because often these standards are too restrictive and would potentially prohibit certain uses and structures that would benefit residents. So on December 5th, 2023, the City Council set the 2024 docket, which included the approval of two separate proposals, one by the City of Mercer Island and the other by the Mercer Island Country Club, both to establish regulations for temporary uses and structures. City Council directed staff to develop interim regulations to address both docketed items and to renew the existing interim regulations for outdoor dining, which is the temporary use, at its regular business meeting on April 2nd of this year, as Jeff said. So the new interim regulations would create a new code section under MICC 19.06.130, which is in the General Regulations chapter. The standards would establish when a Type 1 temporary use permit is required and what the application requirements look like, what temporary uses and structures are exempt from these permit requirements, the criteria for approval, additional conditions for mobile food vendors, and time limitations for different categories of temporary uses and structures, which I will go over at the next slide, and standards for removal of the temporary use and/or structure and assurance devices. These standards would apply to all temporary uses on private property. So the new section for temporary uses and structures establishes standards for time limitations for different categories of temporary uses. All temporary uses and structures, not including activities listed as exempt or mobile food vendors, are allowed a maximum duration of 180 days. Activities listed as exempt, which are not related to another permit, are allowed a maximum of duration of 30 days in any calendar year, and activities listed as exempt that are related to another permit are allowed a maximum duration of 180 days in any calendar year. Mobile food vendors are allowed for a maximum of 30 days. And temporary uses and structures and activities listed as exempt that are related to another permit may request an extension of up to 30 days, which is that footnote there, upon the applicant submitting a request in writing and showing compliance with all the conditions of permit approval. A property will not be granted a temporary use permit for a minimum of 3 months or 90 days after the expiration of a temporary use permit. So this slide covers the uses and structures that are listed as exempt from the temporary use permit requirements, including garage, yard, and estate sales, rummage, and other outdoor sales cited at a school, church, or other institutional facility, fireworks stands, which would need to be amended to be consistent with any changes regarding fireworks if or when those are adopted, and construction-related activities like a contractor's office, storage yard, and equipment parking on or near the site of an active construction project. These uses are exempt from the permit requirements, but must still comply with other substantive requirements of this chapter, like time limitations and removal. So the last thing I'll discuss today is the renewal of the interim regulations for outdoor dining, which authorizes the temporary use of private parking spaces for outdoor dining and provides a temporary waiver of the minimum parking regulations for eating and drinking establishments. The ordinance includes the renewal of these existing interim regulations, which were originally adopted on August 4th of 2020. And the recommended action is to move to schedule the second reading of ordinance number 24C-07 for June 18th, 2024.
Okay. If that's the end of your deck, you can take the screen share down. I appreciate that. And council, I'm going to open it up to questions to the extent that anyone has any questions, or if anybody would like to make a motion.
Thanks.
Councilmember Randall.
Mr. Mayor, well, thank you, Molly and Jeff. I just wanted to compliment you both on, and the work, anyone who worked behind the scenes on this to get these regulations out with basically lightning speed in a way that will, definitely help the tennis bubble issue and may enable other temporary uses for private and public benefit. I appreciate the filling of the gap in those regulations and the speed with which it happened. I would like to inquire, and I don't know if our city attorney is on, but at the time that it's appropriate to make a motion, I would be inclined to move to waive a second reading and adopt this ordinance tonight. And I'm a little unclear as to the process on that, but it does look like other council members have questions before we maybe get to that.
Okay, and I see Bio's on the screen, so I'll give him the opportunity to answer that question.
Mayor Neese and Councilmember Andro. To adopt this interim ordinance tonight, you would have to suspend the rules of procedure, rules of procedures that requires a second reading for an ordinance. You can do that by motion. The motion will require a two-thirds majority, so that's 4+1 of the body. And as once the rule for the second reading is suspended, you can make a motion to adopt the current ordinance before you tonight, and that will require just a simple majority.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
I was actually going to make the motion that Councilmember Andrew was referring to, so if she would like the honor of that, I'll defer to her.
We'll let you second it, as you will. Back to you, Councilmember Andrew.
Fair enough. Wow. So I would move to suspend the rules of procedure that require a second reading of an ordinance, and that's it, right?
That's it. You want it as separate, yeah.
Yeah, they have to be
So is that a second, Councilmember Reynolds?
Second, yes.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Anderl, seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. City Clerk's giving me the thumbs up that she's got it. Not seeing any discussion. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Abstain.
Okay,
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
very good. Motion passes. So council, is there a motion to schedule second well, now we just need a motion to adopt ordinance?
I move to adopt ordinance number 24C-07.
Second.
Who is the second on that? Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
Yeah.
Moved by Councilmember Anderl, seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. Not seeing any discussion. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Abstain.
Mayor Neese.
All right,
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
okay, motion passes. Our next item of regular business is AB 6489, emergency ordinance to adopt interim residential parking regulations responsive to SB 6015, which will begin our next public hearing of the evening and on emergency ordinance number 24COA. The public hearing is now open as of 6:13 p.m. Individuals registered with the city clerk before 4 p.m. today may make public comment on this agenda item. You'll be called by name when it's your turn to speak. Please speak audibly. State your name and city of residence for the record. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. City Clerk, is anyone signed up for public comment who wishes to address the council?
Mr. Mayor, there was no one who signed up to speak during this public hearing.
Okay, as there is no further testimony this evening, the public portion of this hearing is closed as of 6:13 p.m. And we welcome again CPD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you again, Mayor. My video is being suddenly testy here, but we've got another short presentation scheduled for you. Ryan Harriman, our planning manager, has joined us for this item, and another half dozen slides or so to walk you through the logistics and the technicalities of implementing Senate Bill 6015. Frankly, in a hurry, we've had 90 days to do it, and I can also share with you as a final comment, there are many other cities around the area that I don't believe are going to meet this deadline. So we managed to get on this one concurrently with the temporary uses, and we're here tonight with some interim regs for you. Ryan, why don't you share your screen and walk the council through the slide deck, please?
Will do, Jeff. All right, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, City of Mercer Island City Council, Ryan Harriman, Planning Manager. This evening, I'm providing a presentation on the parking requirements for residential development. This is in response to Senate Bill 6015. This is related to Agenda Bill item number 6489. course, my computer is acting up too. On March 6, 2024, the state legislature passed SB 6015, which was signed by the governor on March 26th. This relates to the parking requirements for residential development. SB 6015 becomes effective on June 6th, which by that time jurisdictions must be in compliance. So what does SB 6015 do? It really is a formation or a reform to what counts as a parking standard and the parking spaces for the purpose of minimum parking requirements. This is done by limiting parking stalls, parking garages and carports may not be required as part of this bill. Parking spaces may be enclosed or unenclosed. Tandem parking spaces count towards meeting the minimum parking requirements at a rate of 1 space per 20 feet. Gravel surfacing may not be prohibited as parking areas or materials, and the parking spaces may not be required to exceed 8 feet by 20 feet except for required accessible parking spaces. So what are the impacts of Senate Bill 6015 as they relate to Mercer Island? Well, the residential parking regulations contained within sections of our code are largely inconsistent with regulatory mandates created by Senate Bill 6015. And if the council doesn't adopt the emergency ordinance this evening, Ordinance 24C-08, the residential standards listed throughout the Mercer Island City Code would be out of compliance with SB 6015 and the Growth Management Act. With the effective date of this legislation as of June 6th, this creates an emergency necessitating the adoption of an emergency ordinance to become effective immediately to ensure compliance with Senate Bill 6015. That with the adoption of the work plan that's contained within the emergency ordinance, the interim regulations for parking, residential parking, would be effective immediately for a period up to 1 year or until permanent regulations are adopted. With that said, our recommendation, or recommended actions for council is to adopt emergency ordinance number 24C-08 immediately, establishing interim regulations for residential parking and a work plan in response. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Perfect, thank you. First quick procedural question is that the motion doesn't require a separate motion to waive council rules of procedure. We're just going to do this one in one reading, is that right?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay.
It's an emergency ordinance, so this one also requires, well, this one requires a 2/3 majority as well for +1, but it does not require a suspension of the rules because it already meets the exemption for that in your rules.
Okay, perfect. All right. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, Jeff or Ryan, what was provided by the state for this process?
The final bill itself, and then some diligence by Mayor Neese, who helped us get a couple clarifications from Olympia on the applicability of the bill. To be candid with you, Deputy Mayor, that was what we had to work with on this. We did work with our city attorney's office, who helped us craft the code and, working with us on the draft ordinance and the regulations that helped pull us along as well on this one.
I suspected your answer would be something along those lines. So thanks for all your work to get that done. Obviously, 90 days is a pretty quick turnaround here, and I hope that the fact that so many cities were not able to comply is going to send a message to Olympia for next session when they start to think about timelines for implementation of complicated and unique regulations.
We're not a big fan of the 90-day turnarounds.
Can't imagine.
Okay, not seeing any other discussion. Council, is there a motion to adopt emergency ordinance number 24C08, establishing interim zoning measures for residential parking and work plan in response to SB 6015?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Reynolds, seconded by Councilmember Weicker. Councilmember Weinberg, you have a question?
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Okay.
So on page 15, one of the adjustments is in Exhibit C, page 15 of the bill, in Exhibit C, there's a 35-word sentence that I want to make a minor grammatical change or grammatical fix to. The sentence currently reads, parking stalls shall be located within a structure underground or behind buildings except for residential developments and developments containing residential units shall utilize the residential development parking standards contained within MICC, and it has the reference to the code numbers. And the change that I'm proposing is to add the word which, W-H-I-C-H, after the last comma to make it clear that it's the that the residential development and parking standards apply to the residential developments and not to the first subject of the sentence, which is parking stalls.
Okay. City Clerk, did you capture a motion out of that?
Did
Can
not
we,
capture a motion out of that.
now that,
Sure.
now that you've got it, can you direct us to exactly where you're at before we get going again?
So this is on page 15 it's in Exhibit C, and in paragraph A of the section 19.11.130, there's one sentence that has the red underlines there showing what we've added there. And essentially, the motion is to add the word which after the last comma.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sharing it on the screen.
So it's a which in front of the shall? After
Correct.
units, comma, which?
Yes, precisely.
Okay, so City Clerk, I don't know how you want to best capture that motion, that amendment to the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would say move to amend 19.11.130A to add the word which, but I wasn't sure where the word which was going.
In front of shall utilize the residential development in the new language being proposed.
Okay.
Second.
It's moved by Weinberg, it's seconded by Reynolds.
Reynolds had done it earlier.
Do you have another amendment?
No.
I'm just waiting for the City Clerk to catch up. Okay. All right. Is there any discussion? Any objection from staff? No. All right, City
No
Clerk,
objection. No.
please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker?
Aye.
Councilmember Andral? Aye. Councilmember Weinberg?
Aye.
And Mayor Neese.
Did you just call me?
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Not that bright. Okay, amendment to the motion passes. I want to ask the staff, Councilmember Reynolds had raised a question about text on the bottom of a table on page 22. Did we need to address any change there?
No, that was the language, we amended that language to be compliant with the bill itself, so.
Okay, so there's no change there. All right, any other amendments in this riveting bill? All right, City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Councilmember Andral? Aye. Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker?
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg?
Aye.
And Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, the main event. Our next item of regular business is AB 6468, the 2025 through 2030 6-year Transportation Improvement Program Review and Public Hearing. which will begin with our last public hearing of the evening on the 25 through 30 6-year Transportation Improvement Program. This public hearing is now open as of 6:25 p.m. Individuals who registered with the city clerk before 4 p.m. today may make public comment on this agenda item. You'll be called by name. When it's your turn to speak, please speak audibly, state your name and city of residence for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. City clerk, is there anyone that signed up for public comment that wishes to address the council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, would you like me to call the first speaker?
Yes, please.
First speaker tonight is Heather Ring.
Hello, my name's Heather Ring. I've lived on Mercer Island for 6 years, and I wanted to comment on the opportunity for improved pedestrian bike facilities. I think that's what they're called. So on January 25th of this year, at 7:45 a.m., my 6th grader was walking down Shore Club Drive, where we live, to his bus stop on Mercerwood Drive, and he was hit by a car. And it was very upsetting. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that intersection, but Shore Club Drive has no shoulder, even though it's very heavily walked on by walkers, joggers. It's part of the trail system, et cetera. My son's bus stop, which is the same, he goes to IMS, it's the Northwood bus stop as well. He's asked to wait on what is about a 1.5-foot kind of shoulder into somebody's yard, waiting for his bus on Mercerwood Drive, which is very, very busy. And so my request is that we expand the sidewalk from 92nd Avenue, where it stops, all the way down to East Mercer, because that particular corridor is very, very heavily trafficked by children, mothers with strollers, lots of dog walkers, scooters, bikes, you name it, athletes coming down from the high school to going on runs. It's just, it's very heavily trafficked, and it seems to make sense to punch the pedestrian facility all the way over to East Mercer Drive. So that's kind of what I was hoping. I did post on Let's Talk. I was delighted to see another neighbor echo my request for this particular area. When I was poking around the kind of past improvement plans, it looked like there was one in the 90s that called this particular area out as well. So 30 years ago, it was identified as an opportunity. The shoulder disappears, there's lots of blind spots, it's just very unsafe. And my son was hit, unfortunately. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker tonight is Jason Chen.
Hi. Hello, testing. Yeah, hi, my name is Jason Chan. Thank you, City Council and staff. I've lived here for 12 years. My wife grew up on the south end near Groveland Beach, and we love living here. So thank you for all you do, first of all. I have 3 kids. 2 go to West Mercer, 1 goes to IMS. And I'm not here just representing my family, but I'm representing my community on 71st Street, Avenue Southeast. We're a unique street, which you'll hear about later through a pizza box demonstration, which is, it has a blind 90-degree turn, and it's unlit, and there's no sidewalks. And just a month ago, we had someone almost get hit fatally head-on. It was a child, and they were riding a bike around the blind corner, and there's another car coming up. I think it was an Amazon van or something like that, and they almost met head-on. And over the years that I've lived around here, I see a couple of these every year, where it's a close call, and it's basically a fatality waiting to happen. 3 years ago, in 2021, our neighborhood, which is very close, we have a summer barbecue every year. We met and we discussed this, and we actually formed a committee. And the committee some of the folks are here. We also posted on the Let's Talk network. By the way, it is a little difficult for older people to post theirs, so I think there were maybe 10 comments, but there could have been at least 20, I think, but there's some technical issues with that. But we met, and we have been engaging with the city for about 3 years now on making it more safe. Some things have sort of worked, some things haven't. It's still dangerous, basically. We put in some of those plastic poles to have cars come and not go through a center. Those have been knocked down. We put some thermoplastic slow signs down on the street. Those have actually worn out because of the hard braking before the corner. And so all the spot things we've done have not been effective. we need a better plan. Since then, we've engaged with the new transportation engineer, Rebecca O'Sullivan, and we've been thankful for her. And she's been making some progress, and that's why I'm here today, because we need more progress. In response to the petition, Rebecca said they would do three things. One is our street's very narrow. That's part of the problem, and so there'll be a repaving moved up from 2026 to 2025. We'd like it sooner, but we understand the constraints, the resources and whatnot. Also, there will be a safety study conducted soon. We'd like that safety study to happen this year, and as well as a recommendation this year in anticipation of the road repaving. And so I'm confident that we could get this done. Thank you for hearing me, City Council and staff. I really appreciate the listening so far, but we need help before this becomes a real disaster and we have a fatality on their street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Warren Appleton.
Good afternoon. I'm Warren Appleton. I personally have lived here since 1997. My wife has owned property here since 1982. And I live on 71st Avenue Southeast. This is the famous pizza box. This pizza box is 2 years old. This was our 2 years and 2 months old. We've repurposed the box to demonstrate 71st Avenue, 72nd, and 70th. The turn we're talking about is where 71st Avenue turns and becomes 70th, and then becomes 71st again. School bus stop, my house, Skip's house, Diane's house, Jason's house. This corner is a disaster. I come to you not only as a resident, but as a retired emergency physician of 50 years, a plaintiff's attorney, and a former city council member at Redmond. This is a risk management issue that the city should not be facing today. This corner has been dangerous since it was a cow path. This road at points is not a 2-lane road. It is 16 feet wide at its narrowest. 18 children under the age of 12 lived on this road in the last school year. They come from here to go home, they have to come down this corner. This corner right here now has a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit. With e-bikes, e-scooters, Amazon vans, 10 feet high, 8 feet wide, 20 feet long, weighing 10,000 pounds. FedEx, same sizes, weighing 16,000 pounds, coming around this corner, and a kid on an e-bike, closing speed could be 25 miles an hour. That's death, and it'll change the driver's life forever. It also puts the city at risk. There have been some improvements made, but I have to tell you, if I was the plaintiff's attorney and there was a death here, I'd be all over you. More can be done. We've supplied pictures of what other communities have been doing. Now, having said all of this, I do want to say that I congratulate Ms. O'Sullivan. Since she has taken over this, in the restraints of her job as a city engineer, she has been available, attentive, and responsible. In the 19 or 18 seconds I have left, I can't go over 2.5 years of our experience with the city. I'll stay after the meeting if you want to talk. But we need some action. This year, the city needs action, so it is not at risk. And then we need to be on improvements next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Diane Edmonds.
Hello, I'm new at this. Skip and I live on that corner of the street, and we have many concerns about our street, and I think probably they were based on the fact that we have been evaluated as an alley since the time we moved there 27.5 years ago. The street since has grown. We have 22 houses. We have 7 people pay more than $20,000 a year in property tax. We pay $420,000 a year, just our street, for property taxes. So our street has grown, and the orders that are affecting it need to be considered. One of them is we do not have regular street maintenance. No sweeping. I have requested, please look into this, except they said you have to talk to the council because they're the ones that tell us, the street sweepers, who to visit and who not to. They have a priority. You evidently have a priority list. We are at the bottom. They said we will sweep your street 2 times a year. They will not change. So they said you have to speak to the city council to change that and put us on a regular street maintenance program. The excuses that the maintenance department has given us has been, we only have 5 workers. This was in 1996 when that was told. Recently, I was told, we only have 5 workers. In 27 years, they haven't helped those workers out. So we request you hire a few more workers and you get another machine that will help. We have 84 miles of road on Mercer Island, 5 people to do the entire work. So I would please help us out. Our street's unique, but it has grown and it's not an alley. It's a big street now, but needs to have repavement and it needs to be helped. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Skip Edmonds. We will then move to Rowan Lumpkin.
Start video.
Dear Mayor Niece and members of the City Council, my name is Rowan Lumpkin and I'm 8 years old. I am a 2nd grader at West Mercer Elementary School. My family and I live on First Hill. I am worried about the intersection at 72nd and 29th Street. I am writing to ask if you would consider making the crosswalk a safer area. There are a number of reasons why we need a safer crosswalk. 72nd Street is a busy road with many cars. A lot of cars are going too fast. Kids in the neighborhood cross at this intersection to get to First Hill Park and to school bus stops. Many people enjoy walking the loop. People also like to walk their dogs on this route. The crosswalk is hard to see, especially at night. The hill is slanted and it makes it hard to see kids and adults. My idea is to add a lighted crosswalk so it will make it safer for people to cross. I saw one at 76th Avenue, but it isn't by a local pet store. And I think it works very well. And thought it would be safer if we added a lighted crosswalk at 72nd and 29th Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker tonight will be Jay Greer.
All right, can you hear me?
Welcome.
All right, thank you. So my name is Jay Greer. I'm a resident of Mercer Island. I have lived on Mercer Island since 2011. I have 3 teenage children currently in the Mercer Island school system, 2 at the high school, 1 at the middle school. Actually, my oldest graduates in 4 days, so that's exciting. My youngest son, Sam, is an avid mountain bike rider, and I'm assistant coach with Mercer Island's youth mountain bike racing team. To improve safety, I strongly support additional funding for bicycle infrastructure on Mercer Island. This area of focus was highlighted in the recent community survey and is an important safety issue for all islanders. As I mentioned when I last spoke to City Council on March 19th, one observation I have from living here for the last 13 years and watching my children grow up here is that the most important roadways on Mercer Island, such as Island Crest Way and East and West Mercer Way, and other high traffic areas around the island are not particularly safe for children who are riding bikes, e-bikes, and e-scooters. Unfortunately, not long after I shared this point with City Council, 2 children were hit by cars on Mercer Island. These separate accidents occurred just days apart on April 20th and on April 24th. One child was hit while riding his bicycle in a crosswalk on Island Crest Way, exactly in the area that would be addressed by the Island Crest Way Corridor Improvements Project should it ever be implemented. The mother of the boy described the accident on Nextdoor as she searched for the driver of the car who did not stop after colliding with her son. Her son was knocked to the ground and was in shock, with the impact being hard enough to damage his bicycle. A police report was filed, and at the time they were trying to locate the driver who had left the scene of the accident. The second accident was a boy who was hit while riding his e-scooter over by Pagliacci's. I'm sure that both accidents were traumatic for the children involved and their parents, but thankfully did not result in serious physical injuries. But these accidents easily could have had catastrophic outcomes. With e-bikes and e-scooters, as well as cycling, continue to grow rapidly, and with the light rail station coming soon, safely connecting all of the island should be a priority. This is especially apparent to those of us like myself who live and raise families on the south end. There is still no safe connection from the south end to the city center by bicycle, nor are there safe routes connecting IMS and the Mercer Island High School with students around the island. Yet many students ride bikes and scooters to and from school every day. I challenge you to stop by the high school or the middle school sometime when school is about to start or has just ended, and you will see all manner of personal transportation devices. You'll see bikes, e-bikes, scooters, e-scooters. The other day I saw 2 powered skateboards going along. You'll see them on Mercer Island streets and sidewalks. Overall, the Island Crestway Corridor Improvements Project is a critical step to address this important issue, and it deserves a higher priority and more attention than it's been getting. So that's my main focus, is that. But as others have mentioned here, some of the other speakers, there are pain points all around the island that everybody knows about. Everybody knows certain intersections where accidents have either happened to pedestrians or bicyclists, or they seem like they could be imminent. So I'd love more attention on this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our last speaker tonight is Mark Clausen.
Good evening. I'm Mark Clausen. I live at 6107 Southeast 32nd Street. I've been a Mercer Island resident since August of 1996. I'm commenting on the tip tonight, and I think that it is fortunate that you all had the results of the community survey, because I think it ties in well with my feelings and my comments about the tip. Basically, I think if you care about the priorities of the citizens whom you represent, those priorities should be incorporated into the tip. And I don't think they are now with respect to bicycle infrastructure. Earlier I heard a lot of patting on the back about what a great job the results were to the community survey, and it kind of reminded me of if a parent has a high achieving student and that student straight A's, does well on standardized tests. And that student goes and takes the ACT, which of course has a number of results in percentiles. As we all know, Mercer Island is an elite, wealthy community in a wealthy metropolitan area. We have deep talent base and a very sophisticated citizenry. And so we should do well on these community surveys. We should be in the top 10% on everything. I look at the results of the community survey, and it looks to me like an ACT where the student does well in the 98th percentile in everything except 38% in physics. And I think if the council is really focused on how to make Mercer Island a better place, it shouldn't do a lot of patting on the back about where we got 98%, because that's where we should be. We need to look really hard and take really serious action where we're at 38%. I asked that a page from the community survey be forwarded to you. I don't know if it was. It's page V or Exhibit 1, page 9. It's listed both ways, but it is how the community of Mercer Island compares to other communities nationally. And you will look third from the bottom is condition of bicycle infrastructure in city. 38.4% approve of that. That means that more than 60% of our citizens are dissatisfied with the condition of the bike.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any further testimony this evening?
There are no further speakers tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that, the public portion of this hearing is continued to June 18, 2024. The time now is 6:46 p.m. Council will be breaking the presentation and discussion on the tip into two parts. I need to recuse myself from the discussion and the debate regarding the Island Crestway Corridor Improvements Project, as I have a conflict of interest. I've sought an advisory opinion from the city's ethics officer regarding this project and received an opinion that there is a conflict of interest, that I own property that could be impacted by the project. While the city council has reviewed this topic before and I have participated in discussions, there are now renderings which show my property being impacted. Thus, there is a need for me to recuse myself from further involvement in this project. I will now hand the meeting over to Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Mayor Neese. I will now hand it over to Deputy Public Works Director Patrick Yamashita.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of the City Council. For the record, I'm Patrick Yamashita, your City Engineer and Deputy Public Works Director. Regarding Island Crestway, I have two slides that are related to the project. We're sharing our screen right now. The first slide summarizes where we've been on the project and the path that we are proposing to get to the TIP adoption. And then the second slide lays out our proposed approach for design, funding, and construction. So back in 2022, work began on the Island Crestway Corridor safety analysis. That analysis looked at the Island Crestway Corridor from about 90th Avenue on the north, south to southeast 68th Street, and it looked at safety-related issues throughout that corridor, and there were issues related to pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, driver safety, lack of illumination, and a variety of things. At the conclusion of that analysis and presentation to City Council, it led to the Island Crestway Safety Improvements Project in 2023 into 2024. And that project involves looking at some intersections within the corridor, looking at a shared use path and crosswalk improvements. Specifically, the intersections of Southeast 53rd Place, creating a right turn lane in the eastbound to northbound direction, and the Southeast 68th Street intersection, where there have been a series of traffic accidents and pedestrian accidents. Then regarding the shared use path, we've been working on a feasibility study to look at various alternatives to the location of a shared use path, whether it's on the east side of Island Crestway, within the roadway, or on the west side. And then finally, the design and construction of some crosswalk improvements at Island Park Elementary School, Southeast 62nd Street, and Southeast 63rd Street. And then on March 19th, we provided a project update to the City Council, primarily focusing on the shared use path alternatives City Council and staff and consultant had a robust discussion, but there was no decision made on the path. We did note that the construction of the crosswalk improvements would be scheduled for sometime in June, and we are on track. We've hired a contractor, and contractor should be starting in the next couple of weeks. I do want to note that in the current TIP agenda bill that was published earlier in the week, or actually last week, it incorrectly noted that the City Council decided on a shared use path alignment. That was my error and my mistake. The agenda materials have been corrected and it was republished yesterday. Now, the June 18th meeting, which is coming up in 2 weeks, staff will be presenting path alignment options, and we'll be providing the staff recommendation to the City Council. And at that time, we'll be seeking City Council decision on which alignment the City Council would prefer. And then after that decision on the same night, we would incorporate that preferred alignment into the final TIP that would be adopted on the 18th. Next slide, please. So here's the approach that we're thinking about regarding the project. The draft TIP includes the Island Crestway corridor improvements, and the strategy is essentially to design the improvements now and then pursue grants. And so what that means is to consolidate the design of the 2 intersection safety improvements and the shared use path and focus on that for years 2025 and 2026. We're recommending consolidating all those things for an economy of scale and to coordinate all of that work under one package. And then in year 6 of the TIP, set a placeholder, that's year 2030. And that placeholder would be for phase 1 construction. That's for the shared use path and the Southeast 53rd Place intersection improvements. And you're probably wondering, well, why so far out? The reason is that we need to put construction into the TIP so we would be eligible for pursuing grants. If we're successful in getting lots of grants very rapidly, then we would propose accelerating the construction. Now, this is just phase 1 construction. There would be a phase 2 construction following phase 1, and that would be the intersection improvements at Southeast 68th Street and a second phase of the shared use path improvements. So there would be more information on June 18th regarding the path alternatives and staff recommendations, but we wanted to kind of share our thoughts so you know today what we're thinking for the 18th. And that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Reynolds.
So I just want to clarify one thing. I'm looking at where this item is listed in the tip, 9025-0013. And it says that the initial phase will be from Island Park Elementary to Island Crest Park. Is that correct? Because those are adjoining properties, aren't they?
They are kind of adjoining property. There's a fair distance between, but the thought behind that is that we think it would make sense to start with a modest stretch, see how that goes, and then design a second phase that would do the rest of the work. That first phase, however, could and should include that section from the school to the north up towards 90th. But we didn't specifically include that in the description in the TIP.
Okay, so the school, the north, I'm looking at the map online, towards 90th. Is that where the mailbox is? Is that 90th?
90th is just north of there. And part of the reason why I mentioned that is that when we first presented the alternative to the City Council had, and I believe maybe the public, had some good comments and thoughts about needing to have better connectivity from the school to the north to 90th.
Okay, so can you just clarify, are you saying it will go up to 90th in the first phase or it will not?
Patrick, do you have somebody on your team that's maybe in the background that can share a map? I just want to get some clarity around the location of the improvement.
Yes, we'll see if Rebecca can zoom in on a map that would show that general location.
So Councilmember Reynolds, while we're waiting for that map to come up, and Jason Kintner is here as well, you may recall that our previous discussions about, the entirety of the path from tip to toe resulted in a pretty extraordinarily high cost estimate. Just to plain language this a bit, we believe you have to start somewhere and start, pursuing the development of this path in segments or phases, as Patrick was just alluding to. The highest priority area right now is providing some additional provisions adjacent to that elementary school, where we have high congestion at least 2 times a day. And this starts to build on that council vision. Now, I'll remind you where we are tonight is an initial discussion of the TIP. This is the plan, not the project. So the project will be further discussed in 2 weeks and may even subsequently evolve. And there we go. I'll
Okay,
stop talking now.
So,
Rebecca, are you able to zoom in a little bit more? Sorry to put you on the spot here.
I'm not actually seeing the screen share at all. It was just a black screen. I'm not sure what was showing in council chambers.
I had a map for a minute, but I don't anymore.
Sorry about that. My Zoom seemed to quit on me there for a second. I hope it's showing up now with the 6-year TIP map. And Patrick,
Yes.
I heard your request for zooming in, see, to a particular project area.
Craig, are you seeing that, Craig?
I am seeing the map now, yeah. Thank you. Can you show us where on that
Yeah.
map, West Park and
We just need a little narrative here. Can you use your cursor and point to what we're looking at and the landmarks, please?
Yes, I believe I'm sharing my PowerPoint screen right now, so I'm not sure if you can see my mouse on the screen, but I
Yep,
can reshare.
We can see it. We can see it.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So the crosswalk improvements, just kind of setting the stage of where we're at, are located at 63rd and 62nd, and then up towards Island Park Elementary. And then the pieces that Patrick was referring to, Patrick, that was up towards 90th, which I can.
Right, so Southeast 53rd Street, that's that curvy road towards the top of the page, entering Island Crest from the right or the east. And I believe 90th is at the end of that shaded red line. Right.
Okay, now can you clarify, Patrick? You referred to 90th earlier. It wasn't clear to me if you're saying that phase 1 would go from 90th down to Island Crest Park, or just from the school to Island Crest Park?
Those are 2 alternatives that the city council can decide on the 18th, either just between the school and the park, or between the school and the park, and then from the school to the north to 90th.
But the TIP as constituted right now contemplates only the school to the park, is that correct?
Yes.
And I am correct that although the school is not at the property boundary, the border of the school property and the border of the park property do adjoin each other, do they not?
I believe so, yes. And so when I'm saying path from school to the park, I'm talking essentially from the new crosswalk to new crosswalk. It makes sense to begin and end new facilities at a newly improved crosswalk location.
And the crosswalk is at 63rd?
63rd. There will be one at 62nd and one at 63rd, and then a new one at the school adjacent to the parking lot driveway.
And what's the cross street for that? Because I don't see the school marked on this.
Councilmember Reynolds, I have a suggestion. I think we're going to struggle with this a little tonight with this map. So what I'd like to recommend, this is a discussion only tonight. I'd like to come back to you on the 18th with better graphics that do a better job of demarking where the key landmarks are and making sure we get photos on the ground of the cross streets, what's currently there. And then the council can advise us on the limits of the preferred project in the tip. It does sound like we have some options. Would that meet everyone's needs?
That would be very helpful to me, and I would also value clarification. It's not clear to me if that limited scope that we're talking about of 90th to the park or the school to the park, if that's what we're talking about for the 2025-26 funding or the 2030 funding, or if the 2030 funding is for something else. So perhaps we can clarify that next week or in 2 weeks as well.
Sure.
Councilman Anderell.
Thank you. So if council wanted more information on the projects or proposed projects or requested projects called out in public comment tonight, is that something that we would be able to get on the 18th, or is there a different time horizon on something like that?
So I'll just remind you that right now for this discussion, we're focusing solely on the Island Crest Way projects because Mayor Neese has had to recuse himself. In just a moment, when we've fully concluded our discussion of the Island Crest Way projects, we'll invite Mayor Neese back in to resume his role as the chair. And we actually have a whole slide deck on the rest of the TIP, and then we would invite your discussion and feedback on other projects that you might like to be considered.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, I missed that bifurcation.
Councilmember Wicker.
Me too, I was going to say the same thing. So is staff looking for preferred alternatives to the east or west side yet, or are we just talking about crosswalks tonight? Like, help me clarify what you're looking for,
Yeah,
Rebecca and Patrick.
That'll be on the 18th.
That's on the 18th,
We're
okay.
coming back and asking you to make that decision.
Okay, so what is it we need to talk about without Salim, Mayor Neese
And
here?
any of the TIP projects on Island Crest Way that you'd like to talk to or provide feedback on, and recognizing that you have another agenda item coming in 2 weeks where we'll dive a little bit deeper.
Coming and going. Okay, I'll just say so far so good. I agree with sort of doing those crosswalks as soon as possible and dealing with the ends in the timeline that's already recommended.
Councilmember Reynolds.
General comment, I'm very concerned with slowness of progress on this missing link. I think we need to find a way to prioritize it, but I will defer discussion on that particular issue till next week. I would like, if it's in scope for while the mayor's out, to get some comment on the location of the crosswalk at 63rd versus 62nd. I think there were a number of people that had written in commenting saying it was going in a bad place. I haven't had a chance to walk that route yet, so I don't know what their concern is, but perhaps Patrick can comment on that.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Were we going to give Patrick a chance to respond to the question? Or?
Didn't look like he was going to.
I would like a response if I can get one.
Oh, sure. I actually responded to that question back in March. There was a resident that said that it would be better to set the crosswalk on the south leg of the intersection rather than the north leg. We had looked at both, and we had determined that it was better to leave it in the existing location, which is on the north leg. That's where drivers are used to having the crosswalk, and the infrastructure was better suited for that location. There's a long bus pullout on the south leg that makes it difficult to place a crosswalk there on the south leg, and it increases the crossing distance. So for a variety of reasons, in the end, we determined that the north leg was better and more appropriate.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, I guess in the next presentation on the tip, I think it would be useful to address the concerns that were expressed by the community about the timeline. And if there are good reasons why we need to have 2030 as the planned construction date for phase one, I think it would be helpful to explain what those reasons are. I'm sure there are good reasons, but I think that when there's a gap of 5 years, it's helpful for people to know the reasons why.
And council, let me cut in here and we'll come back to this when we get to the main event here with the TIP. Reprioritization of projects is a council policy decision. Much of what constrains us is resources, funding. So we will attempt through this phase of work, which is a transportation improvement plan, to get the priorities aligned based on your direction and available funding. Know that there is another conversation coming this fall, and I will be happy to say this again when the mayor's in the room, where we will need to look at the entirety of the capital program and what is diminishing resources in our real estate excise tax revenues, and ask you to weigh in on prioritizing the entire capital project. So while I generally hear you and support the desire to make projects happen sooner, we are presenting you a plan based on our limited resources. And the last time we were in front of you with the finance update, real estate excise tax is really at a decade low, if I'm remembering the data correctly, and all of our capital programs are suffering because of it. So we will look to you to help us make those policy decisions. I just wanted to make sure you understood that that decision is yours. We put our professional recommendations on sequencing based on things like design, the number of other projects we have in the queue, et cetera. But reordering is up to you with, of course, our support and advice.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Yes, I would appreciate getting some graphics on this Island Crest proposal, or the Island Crest proposals, I guess, would be helpful. It would be helpful if they were able to be sent out prior to the usual Wednesday prior to Tuesday, so that I, like Councilmember Reynolds, I intend to go walk the thing and put my eyes on this thing, because as good as the graphics are here, I need to look at it. So if those graphics could be sent out sooner of what we're looking at in terms of alternatives for those two proposals, which Mr. Yamashita has referred to or has identified, that would be very helpful to me. I appreciate it.
So we'll make note that if the PowerPoint deck isn't quite available, the data publication, Councilmember Jacobson, we'll get it out soon thereafter in advance of the next meeting with all the cross sections. And for the staff, just a reminder that that material, Mayor Neese will continue to be conflicted, so I'll work with you on how we transmit that information.
Councilmember Wicker.
And so regarding this corridor, Jesse, too, don't we need time to have the plan to be able to go after funding for bike ped safety from other sources to sort of help move it along as well?
Yes, I'm stealing Patrick's thunder a little bit, but I'll share what he said earlier. These type of improvement projects are strong grant contenders, and we build in a little extra time to seek grants. We have to, it's a chicken and egg conundrum often for us. Sometimes it's better to design, get a little further along the way, and then seek grant funds. Sometimes the concept alone is sufficient to apply for grants, but we do envision along this corridor, we will be actively seeking grant funding over the entirety. This will be a long-range development, probably multi-decades. Did I say anything wrong, Patrick?
No.
Councilmember Wyder, was that an old hand or?
Oh, actually, I had a question, but it can wait until the general discussion of the tip. It's not specific to that Island Crestway portion.
Great. If there's no other questions, can someone find Mayor Neese, unless he has taken this opportunity to?
Yes, I have queued Casey, and she will be bringing him back.
All right, we'll see if he comes back.
All right, and in case it's not clear, we'll no longer be discussing the Island Crestway corridor projects. We'll be moving on as soon as Mayor Neese returns. We have a presentation on the tip slide deck, and I see Mayor Neese is back. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council again. This evening, we have 13 remaining slides in our presentation with several presenters, including Rebecca O'Sullivan, our new transportation engineer, Matt Mornick, finance director, and Ian Powell, our street engineer. And in the background, Clint Morris, our Capital Division Manager, and as always, Jason Kintner, our Chief of Operations. There will be ample time for questions and discussions at the conclusion of our presentation, but please feel free also to interject if you have a question that can't wait. With that, let's kick things off. I have the first few slides. I just want to give you a little bit of background on the TIP. The TIP is actually the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program. RCW 3577 requires an annual update by July 1st. This is something that I think all of you on the City Council have been through more than once, multiple times for many of you. The goals primarily include reinvesting in existing infrastructure, so maintaining what we have, adding new facilities to increase safety and capacity, but at the same time, maintaining a positive street fund balance, doing all of that work, maintaining what we have and building new stuff. Next slide, please. So this outline shows kind of a roadmap of our presentation tonight, but because this is something that you've been through many times in the past, we don't want to go through everything in a lot of detail, but we want to focus on the things that are probably most important to you, and that's hitting the highlights of everything, but then focusing mostly on the new street and pedestrian and bicycle facility projects. The agenda bill is pretty dense. There are 6 exhibits, and I'm assuming that you've read as much as you want and you're up to speed. So with that, we're going to do a high-level overview of most things and focus on new projects. Next slide, please. So your agenda bill includes an update of the 2024 construction projects. A few of those projects are already under construction, and many are going to be soon to be starting construction. Again, if you want more information, you can go to your agenda bill and read at your pleasure. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Rebecca to talk more about the TIP process.
Thanks, Patrick. Rebecca O'Sullivan, Transportation Engineer. The TIP public comment period started March 20th and it runs through June 18th. We advertise the public comment period on the city's website, MI Weekly, MI Reporter, and Let's Talk. And during this time, folks can comment on the previously adopted TIP or suggest new project ideas. In total, we received 48 comments, with over half of these related to pedestrian bicycle facilities and a quarter related to residential resurfacing. And all comments are captured in Exhibit 1 of the agenda bill today. Schedule-wise, we are in the council review and public hearing stage now that draft development is complete. Following today's meeting, we'll be incorporating all input from City Council and update the TIP accordingly. Then at the June 18th meeting, the public comment period will come to an end and the TIP is scheduled for adoption. The first priority of the TIP is preserving and maintaining our existing transportation network here on the island, which includes 58 miles of residential streets and just under 26 miles of arterials. And then the second priority is to build new transportation facilities that are necessary for mobility and safety on the island. And I would like to highlight this area in blue, that the city's comprehensive plan and CIP budget policies do prioritize maintaining existing facilities over constructing new facilities. Our team evaluates several criteria when selecting projects for the TIP. We look at the condition of existing infrastructure. We identify where there's gaps in our network and how we may be able to complete those gaps. And then we also ensure that all proposed projects also align with other city plans, goals, and standards. We coordinate internally with our public works team to schedule any surface improvements after any underground utility projects. And also when selecting projects, we make sure to review all input from the public and the priorities expressed by the Mercer Island School District.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Neese and members of the council. For the record, Matt Mornick, your finance director. I'm just going to head and walk through some of the finances for the Transportation Improvement Program. As the council is well aware, all transportation-related improvements on the island are funded through the Street Fund, which is made up of revenues that are restricted to investments in transportation and the right-of-way. Exhibit 2 in the agenda bill outlines how the Street Fund is anticipated to fluctuate based on the mix and sequence of projects that the capital team has proposed between 2025 and 2030. The graphic on this slide is a snapshot of projected expenditures as a percent of total uses for the street fund. Expenditures are broken into 5 categories to give the City Council a high-level context on the TIP spending plan in 2025 and 2026. At the beginning of the TIP planning period, staff estimates a beginning fund balance of $6.2 million in the street fund. The fund balance remains positive through the end of 2028, but it's going negative in 2029 and 2030. This negative projection in the out years is due to a variety of factors that have been already touched upon by some of my colleagues tonight. But first, staff's focus over the past 4 years has been to complete traffic safety enhancement projects paid for with one-time revenues, largely funded from resources from the 2017 Sound Transit Settlement Agreement. These funds must be spent by December of 2025, and based on current work that's underway, staff is on track to spend down resources tied to Section 5 of the settlement agreement in their entirety by the end of this year. Second, as indicated in finance presentations in May, and to follow the point that City Manager Bond raised a minute ago, key revenue that funds transportation improvements, the real estate excise tax revenues, has remained on a downward trend since mid-2022. And so I anticipate that this revenue will recover in time, but as it stands, 2023 was a 14-year low, and 2024 revenues through the first quarter are tracking below revenues from the same period compared to last year. And so that leads to a final point I'd like to make, which is maybe the more obvious when you're reviewing the proposed TIP, and that the transportation improvement needs in the community outpace the resources that we presently anticipate receiving in 2026 through 2030. This is not uncommon. The TIP is an important planning tool that staff uses to prepare for critical infrastructure investments over the long term. And so we are working closely with the City Council and look forward to working with you to prioritize and make strategic investments based on the resources that are available in the near term. And so the staff team is going to closely track REIT revenue activity while also pursuing outside funding opportunities like the recent Federal Highway Administration's Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, in which the city was awarded $320,000 to develop the pedestrian and bicycle facilities plan in 2026 and 2027, which will cost an estimated $400,000 to complete. And so these outside awards are significant and will keep the project work that's currently underway and outlined in the TIP on track. So with that, I believe I'll hand it over to my colleague Ian, and will be readily available to answer questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Good evening, Council. My name is Ian Powell, and I am the street engineer. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Mercer Island Street Network. There's approximately 83.5 miles of city-maintained roads, and these are split approximately 1/3 arterial and 2/3 residential. Different segments of the network are in different ages and therefore at different points in their life cycle. So in order to prioritize paving projects, we use the Pavement Condition Index, which gives us a score of each network segment on a scale of 0 to 100. This data is updated every 3 years. Our current data is from 2022, so we'll be collecting new data next year in 2025. Next slide, please. A few pedestrian and bicycle elements that we want to cover in this year's TIP. First is the ADA Transition Plan implementation. This plan is to update existing ADA ramps throughout the island that currently do not meet ADA standards. This was started in the current biennium with updating or upgrading ADA ramps in the town center. As ramps in the town center are completed, we will expand further out to ramps throughout the island. This year's TIP also includes 13 sidewalk or path improvement projects. Some of these are tied to overlay projects. Also, you can see on the map on the right that we're almost complete with the Mercer Way Shoulder program. This was started in the early 2000s The last segment of West Mercer Way will be complete this year, and the final segment of East Mercer Way will be complete in 2026. Also planned to start in 2026 is an update to the pedestrian and bicycle facilities plan. The current plan is outdated. And as Matt just mentioned, we were recently awarded $320,000 in grant funds to help develop this plan. Next slide, please. Some projects that were modified in this year's TIP, you can see a map on the right there. All the projects circled in blue were changed from the previous TIP. Some of these changes can be due to cost increases or coordination with other project timelines, usually underground utility projects such as storm projects, water projects, or sewer projects. Changes in their timeline affect the changes in the paving and sidewalk timeline as they have to follow the underground utility work. If you refer to Exhibit 3 in your agenda bill packet, these projects that have been modified are shown in blue text so you can see how they were modified. Next slide, please. Some new projects to highlight from this year's TIP. First is an overlay of the intersection of 76th Avenue and North Mercer Way. This is the intersection right at the on-ramp to westbound I-90. This will be done in 2026 after Sound Transit completes their signal project. Next, we have a new mid-block crossing at 76th Avenue right at Starbucks. This will install there is a crosswalk there now, but this will install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon and new ADA ramps. And 3 projects that were added for 2030. First, we have sidewalk improvements on 27th at the intersection of 27th and 76th Avenue. The improvements are on 27th Street heading to the west, approximately 325 feet. This will replace existing sidewalk, curb and gutter, driveways, and ADA ramps. Next, we have Mercerwood Drive pedestrian improvements. This would install new sidewalk and ADA ramps from 93rd Avenue to 96th Avenue. And last, we have an Island Crest Way crosswalk enhancement at Southeast 46th. This would install a pedestrian signal. And these last 2 projects are school district priority projects or safe route to school projects. And with that, I will hand it back to Patrick.
Okay, so this is the last slide, and I'm just going to talk very quickly about next steps. Tonight, we're going to solicit feedback from the City Council, and then in 2 weeks on June 18th, we will present an updated TIP if the council asks staff to make any changes. You will continue the public hearing and then close it that evening, and then the hope is that you will adopt the TIP on June 18th. With that, that concludes our staff presentation, and there are several of us available to answer any questions you might have.
So we can stop screen sharing. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I said this when you were out of the room, but I want to say it again for your benefit. I'll just remind everyone that the TIP is a planning document. We adopted it this time of the year per state law. But this fall, the City Council will be undertaking the biennial budget process review. You just heard from Matt Mornick. We will need to take the TIP along with all of the capital improvement projects under consideration for a really in-depth discussion. And what I anticipate will likely need to be some reprioritization due to funding challenges we have in our capital program. So I still recommend you adopt a prioritized TIP when we come back to you in two weeks. But I want to just put an asterisk on that and know that we may need to make some additional adjustments this fall when we review it in context with all of the other capital work we have on deck. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, let me start with a quick question for probably Patrick. It's about the Gallagher Hill project, which is programmed for 26 and 27. It's the project ID 90.25.0009. Can you tell me what is it that project does for the safe route to school or adding those sidewalks down Gallagher Hill that the Mercerwood Drive project that is a priority the district doesn't do? Could we do one and not the other and accomplish, the safety concerns that they would like to do if we ran Mercerwood all the way to East Mercer Way? Would that solve the same problem in a different way?
That's a good question, a great question, actually. They both kind of will do the same thing, but they're serving different neighborhoods and locations. just given their physical locations. Gallagher Hill Road going down to 36th near City Hall versus, versus the other one being further to the east and intersecting with the East Mercer Way. So they are separate and distinct locations and serving two different communities.
Sure. And given that so I assume at some analytical level, somebody said both are necessary, and then Gallagher Hill got prioritized through, the history of the TIP. Would it be wise to reprioritize Mercerwood Drive over Gallagher Hill, given, the future of Gallagher Hill and the fact that Mercerwood Drive is arguably an easier climb for almost anybody on a bike, on foot, on a scooter than Gallagher Hill is? Is that something that we could put some analysis into?
Sure, we could. One thing that we try to consider when we're looking at large-scale pedestrian improvements is that we try to time it with the roadway overlay or roadway improvement. There's an economy of scale, and it's easier to design both projects at once and then construct them both. In particular, on Gallagher Hill Road, that pedestrian improvement originally came out of some public comments from many people in the neighborhood. It was probably about 6 years ago. And we held back on the timing of that until the roadway overlay or roadway condition was such that we could partner those two projects together. For Gallagher Hill Road, in terms of the construction, it will be easier to build a sidewalk or path along Gallagher Hill Road because there is more physical space that is easier to convert to a sidewalk.
But you already have a 93rd to 96 configuration for Mercerwood, right? So some planning has gone in and somebody's made the assessment that there's room for that infrastructure already?
That there is room, or that we could create some room for that segment, yes.
Okay, so City Manager, what are you looking for from council in terms of consensus to try and get, for example, this done before this fall, to look at how we might prioritize Mercerwood Drive over Gallagher Hill?
In terms of the specific project, or is that a global question about the capital program?
No, this specific project. Pivoting, it sounds like we're programming 93rd to 96 in Mercerwood Drive already, and Gallagher Hill is pushed out to 26, 27. The question is, could we deprogram Gallagher Hill and then program Mercerwood Drive all the way to East Mercer Way? That would require some analysis. I don't expect anybody to make that decision tonight.
If the council majority would like to see that analysis done, it would probably be like back of napkin style between now and the next meeting. Oh, Jason's here. I should probably turn this over to him. We can do that. I do need some direction. We're looking for direction from you tonight on what you'd like us to come back with in 2 weeks. Jason?
Yeah, I'll just tie into that. You're right on. So if there's a thumbs up from the council, from the majority of the council to do that analysis, we would include that as part of our return to the council in 2 weeks with that analysis, and then ultimately the council can make a decision on whether or not we make that move. But staff can certainly do that if the council would like us to, and we can bring back the information 2 weeks from now and have a larger conversation and talk about how it impacts the overall TIP and construction schedule better, and potential impacts to other projects that are in that time frame as well. So we'll sort of do the shuffling and analyzation and analysis and come back to you in 2 weeks.
Okay, so for the benefit of the council, I'll reserve the thumbs up exercise until a little bit later. I'm going to get through questions first, so I'm going to go to Councilmember Anderl.
Lower my hand, microphone's on. Yeah, thanks. I had asked earlier, Mayor Neese, when you were out of the room, about whether we could get some staff feedback on the 3 areas that were highlighted in public comment, and I was reminded that we needed to do that when you were in the room, when you were out of the room. Is that going to be possible? Frankly, the TIP is big, and I, during public comment, was not necessarily able to connect whether there are TIP projects in there already associated with the routes or locations that the public commenters addressed, but I would sure like some more information on that by the 18th if we could get that.
I can take a stab at a response if that would be helpful tonight.
Sure. That'd be great.
There were 7 public comments. The first one was Heather Ring, and I believe she was asking for sidewalk improvements that are consistent with what the mayor was asking for.
Okay, because I thought she said expand the sidewalk Shorewood to East Mercer. And Mayor Neese is.
To East Mercer ideally, but we'll take it to 96. Halfway there.
Yeah, so
okay.
that's not going to pick up on the video, but we'll turn it back to Patrick
Yeah,
just to
sorry.
characterize that.
And then the next several are from residents of the 71st Avenue Southeast neighborhood. Transportation staff, especially Rebecca, has been working with them very diligently over the last year, almost year, working on a variety of spot improvements, some vegetation trimming to improve visibility, addition of signage, I believe, and some pavement marking. The residents indicated that some of those things are working or have helped, but maybe not everything. We are also looking at repaving the roadway next year, looking at opportunities to widen the narrowest parts of the roadway where feasible, and then doing a safety analysis ahead of that paving. Those are a lot of different things, and we're trying to be as responsive as we can with the limited resources financially and staff-wise that we have.
And Patrick, just to confirm, the 71st elements we just talked about are included in the 2025 TIP, correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then I guess the only other specific location was a crosswalk improvement at 72nd and 29th, lighted. A request for a lighted crosswalk, is that, it's not currently in the tip, is it?
So I think, no, it's not. The request was for, I believe, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, just like near Aljoya, the mid-block crosswalk. We are proposing one at the mid-block crosswalk at Starbucks, and we just installed a couple on 77th near the new light rail station. All those locations met the criteria for installation of the flashing beacons. I don't believe that the intersection on First Hill meet those criteria, but we have been looking at a variety of alternatives to try to improve the crosswalk, from what I recall. Is that correct, Rebecca?
Since I've been with the city, I don't know if I've been a part of the 72nd and 29th intersection analyses, but I'm happy to take a look and see where my predecessor left off with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we can reach out to the Lumpkin family.
Okay, thanks for that. Councilmember Weinberg.
A couple questions. I guess on the 71st Street, has it been considered disconnecting 71st from 70th, turning the alley into essentially a dead-end street, so that the cars trying to go through to get a faster way to get to the neighborhood south of there would be deterred from doing so? Or is the connection between the two streets necessary for fire egress or for other safety reasons?
Great question, and I think you answered your own question. It is very important to provide the best circulation for emergency vehicles as possible. Anytime that we might create a dead end, it can create some unintended consequences. There might be drivers that end up driving on that road, realizing it's a dead end, and turn around, and that kind of thing can drive residents crazy. And just the backup maneuvers sometimes can put pedestrians, kids, adults in jeopardy. So we try to look at those things carefully, but primarily it does affect emergency response.
A second question, I can wait for the second round if you want.
Go ahead.
Okay. There's a question for Director Mornick. I'm noticing that in the model for revenues on, I guess this is on page 30 of the agenda bill, the first row that talks about the real estate excise tax and forecasts into the future, what we are modeling the growth of the real estate excise tax. I realize that we're predicting the future, so of course there's going to be uncertainty. But I see that we have it rising by 2% in 25 and 26, and then 5% from 27 onwards. And I noticed in last year's tip that we were projecting a 2% per year increase across the board. So I was wondering, was that a conscious decision to have the model step up to 5% in 2027? And was that in response to the current rate of inflation?
Yes, good question. Thank you, Councilmember Weinberg. So the step up is based on the trend that we saw following the 2008 to 2011 drop in REIT activity. And so it is informing the projections that are being made in 2025 through 2030, in part because we just have limited data at this point in the year on where we anticipate the REIT revenue is going to go. And I anticipate having a much more informed forecast for the City Council in September. So that will lay the groundwork for the 2025 and 2026 budget work that we're going to commence in the fall. But at this point in the year, this was the projection based on the most comparable period of time where we saw these notable lows. So hopefully that answers your question.
I have one other question, if I may.
Quick one, thanks.
Yeah, okay. A clarification question for City Manager Bond. You'd mentioned earlier that there's going to be a discussion this fall about the overall resourcing and scale of the work that we're doing. If the council were to wish a further acceleration of the infrastructure that we're doing to try and keep up with the aging of the infrastructure that was all installed back in the 40s and 50s, is that something that we should discuss in the fall? And is there any preparation work that we should do, or any discussion we should have between now and then in preparation for that?
You can certainly, as a majority of council, share your preferences now, but I would argue that that really solely resides as part of your budget discussion. Any project acceleration or increase in projects has to be tied with funding.
Yep.
And I, as I've already expressed, I have some concerns about the capital discussion we're headed for this fall based on our current projections.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, my question is about the Mercerwood project. Why not extend it, assuming we find a pot of gold somewhere, why not extend it all the way down to East Mercer? Was that something that was considered and declined, or what was the process like there?
We actually looked at from 40th all the way down to East Mercer Way, and the upper segment was the easiest, lesser cost, and provided direct connectivity to the high school and the elementary school. If you look more carefully at your agenda bill, there's a section in it that identifies projects that didn't make the 6-year time frame, but it has a longer time frame. The rest of the work on Mercerwood down to East Mercer Way is shown in that section. If you look from top all the way to the bottom, it is a very significantly expensive project. And we have to balance the funding available with the project needs. And so that's what we decided, that the upper section was the more important. And it was what the school district was asking for first, as a first phase. So that was our thinking.
Okay. I'll follow up with you. I've got a couple of follow-ups there, but I'll follow up on offline.
Okay. Councilmember Reynolds.
You have a quick out-of-the-box question related to 71st, if I remember correctly, that being the 90-degree line turn we were talking about. Is that a two-way street right now? And if it were to be made one way, would that help reduce the risk in that intersection or that corner? And is that viable?
I don't think it's something that we specifically looked at or analyzed. It still does affect vehicular or emergency vehicle circulation, but it's something that we can look at. That's what the majority of the council wishes.
I'd like to, well, I don't know if we need a formal motion, but I think that'd be a good idea to at least explore that and say, does it help address the problem and is it feasible?
I don't think we need a motion. Well, we'll capture it when we get the discussion wrapped up. Is there anything else, Councilmember Reynolds?
That was it.
Okay. Councilmember Weicker.
Thank you, Rebecca, for all your outreach and working with neighbors about questions and areas of concern. And then, Patrick, I have a question for you on projects other D number 90.20.0008, the new one with the Aubrey Davis Parks, Mountains to Sound Trail lighting, Island Crest Way to Shorewood Drive. Can you just talk a little bit more about that since it's new and there's $75,000 in 2025, I assume, for planning and fundraising and working on energy efficient lighting and whatnot, and then 2027 to actually do some of the work? Is that kind of what that project is?
Yes, I believe the 75,000 is the upfront work in the planning and the initial design work, and then the $375,000 is a placeholder for the construction. This project is a parks project. It's identified in the PROS plan, and we included it in the TIP to accommodate the need to apply for grant funding. As I understand it, for this kind of project, unless it's in the TIP, we can't apply for certain grant funds.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, for the project that's for top of Gallagher Hill Road and where it intersects with 40, for the sidewalk replacement there, does that include looking at the crosswalk, the sort of four-way crosswalks there at 40th and Gallagher Hill, where it's the sort of slow right-hand turn there, fast right-hand turn off of Gallagher at 40th?
Deputy Mayor, are you referring to the Southeast 40th Street project?
Yeah.
Projects?
Yeah.
Typically, when we're looking at sidewalk and roadway projects at major intersections, we are looking at the crosswalks as well to see if there's any need for improvement or enhancement or modification.
Great.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions, so looking for a thumbs up for what sounds like a grab basket of 3 items, which is for staff to come back with options on Mercerwood Drive to East Mercer Way, 71st Avenue Southeast solutions, and 72nd and 29th pedestrian crossing at the First Hill Park. Anything else anybody wants to add to this before we look for consensus? No? So a thumbs up, support staff coming back with those options? Looks like that's across the board, so more to come on that. Any other discussions on the TIP before we move off? Very good. Thank you for that. Thanks everyone for joining us. Our next item of regular business is AB 6492, the Water Shortage Consumption Reduction Actions, and we welcome Chief of Operations Jason Kittner.
Good evening, Council. Jason Kittner, Chief of Operations. With me this evening is Elaine Salmagran, our Deputy Public Works Director, as well as Alana DeRigatis, our Sustainability Program Analyst. And we're here to talk about the water shortage consumption reduction actions. But before I turn the floor over to Alana, I want to set the stage about how we got here, why we're here now, and what's the reason and rationale behind it. So with that, I would ask that Elaine shares the screen. Perfect. Next slide. So we have a handful of slides. I'm going to do the first part of the presentation to talk about the why we're here, why we're here in front of the council this evening to talk about this. And then I'll pass it over to Alana to talk about specifically the water shortage contingency plan and our reduction actions and the communication plan that's forthcoming. So why we're here, it's important to understand how the city of Mercer receives water. We are a direct customer of Seattle Public Utilities, and our water is transported across the bridge, primarily through the 16-inch line that follows the I-90 bridge over to the East Mercer boat launch. And then it breaks off into essentially 2 different systems. As you can see on this water system overview map, the purple lines are the Seattle Public Utilities, or the SPU, public infrastructure that they own and operate. The blue lines are City of Mercer Island infrastructure, and the green is the direct water lines to the Shorewood apartment complex. So as you can see, the water comes across the bridge. It goes into sort of a point where it breaks off into 2 sections, the 16-inch and the 24-inch line. This 24-inch line is the Seattle Public Utilities transmission line. The 16-inch is the City of Mercer Island Canyon line, or also known as our emergency backup line. As we'll talk about here in a second, that 24-inch line that runs along Southeast 40th, that is the line in question that we're going to talk about and spend a few slides here to talk about a leak that's on that pipeline. On April 3rd, the city learned that that 24-inch line was leaking just below 40th Ave, now 40th Ave Southeast, near the 95th Court plate, or 95th Court Southeast. You can see here on the map, the little break in the blowout box below is the approximate location of that leak on the 24-inch cast iron Seattle Public Utility line. Also note that in that box below, you can see there's a MI 6-inch asbestos cement pipeline that runs parallel to that 24-inch pipe. So as the water comes in via Seattle Public Utilities, it works its way to the city reservoir tanks near Redwood Park, and then it branches out into the city's distribution system. So as it goes into the tanks, it then comes back out via our pipelines, and including this Mercer Island 6-inch AC pipe here. On April 3rd, when Seattle Public Utilities and the city identified the leak in this location, it was determined that that water leak could lead to soil instability in the area, and we evacuated 20 homes due to the potential risk for the homes below that potential slope area or slide area. Next slide. On April 4th, Seattle Public Utilities were able to reduce that water flow in that 24-inch pipe, eliminating its use as a primary supply line to Mercer Island. So at that point in time, we switched operations to the 16-inch emergency line that runs along East Mercer Way to the reservoir facility. In addition, the city crews also abandoned or shut off water to our 6-inch AC pipe that ran parallel to here to eliminate all water along this hillside. On May 1st and May 22nd, the local emergency was declared with a proclamation, and that proclamation was further ratified by the council on May 21st, which you all know. So what has been done since early April? A lot. This has been a primary focus for the public works teams since early April, and Seattle Public Utilities. We continue to meet regularly, 1 to 2 times per week, working towards a repair for this location. The city and Seattle Public Utilities are both meeting with the impacted and affected neighbors to discuss their primary concerns and provide project updates. Those project updates are also being included on the city's Let's Talk page. As I mentioned previously, the city has permanently abandoned the 6-inch water main in that area. The council, we've talked about the capital improvement program. The council may recall 2 years ago, as part of the water utility discussion, we actually included a program within the water utility to expedite the replacement of a remaining AC pipe or asbestos cement pipe within our distribution system. So the pipe that actually runs parallel to the 24-inch Seattle Public Utility pipe was actually in design for replacement prior to this leak. Upon the leak, we've permanently abandoned this pipe and moved a couple of water services over to a new line to make sure they're in service as a repair is identified. Additionally, since early April, we continue to work with our geotechnical teams across both agencies to assess that slope area and monitor that slope area. And Seattle Public Utilities has been working on a repair for this pipe. The repair that is being proposed is not your conventional or traditional repair, where the utility team would actually dig down to the pipe, do an excavation, and then basically do a spot weld and repair or replace the pipe in an excavated trench or hole. They're actually proposing that the pipe be relined so that there will not be excavation that will be required at the site. The city is currently working to evaluate the impacts of that liner, doing additional water modeling, and making sure that it meets adequate water flow and capacity requirements set forth in the SPU contract and the city operational needs. I'm also happy to report that Seattle Public Utilities, at the city's request, performed a camera closed circuit television inspection of that pipe late last week and has been able to actually video record the interior of that pipe to determine where the leak is located. Next slide. So you might ask why can't we just go out there and do repair, or Seattle Public Utilities can't just go out to the site and do a repair. We have mainline breaks and leaks all the time, and that is true. However, the location of this particular pipe is very, very, very challenging. As you can see here, the picture on the right, it's heavily vegetated. It's not in the middle of a right-of-way or a roadway. There is limited public access to this location, and it is on a steep slope. So it is extremely, extremely, extremely challenging to locate and actually get to the location of where this pipe is essentially at the bottom of a ravine. So as I mentioned previously, Seattle Public Utilities has proposed a liner solution, which includes the installation of a flexible liner just over 1,100 feet in length. That type of solution does not require excavation of the pipe at the leak, but it will include excavation of 2 large pits on either end of the pipe, and then they'll pull the liner through the existing 24-inch main. Their Seattle Public Utilities design does include ongoing leak detection to ensure that we are continuing to monitor the site, monitor this pipe, and that we would be notified promptly if there was any issues in this location moving forward. So here is a map provided by Seattle Public Utilities of what the proposed solution looks like. As you can see, on the blue line in the middle is the existing 24-inch SPU main. The red star in the middle is the approximate location of the current break. As you can see, it's heavily vegetated, surrounded by a number of homes. It does not have a street or concrete or public access directly over the pipe, so it is extremely difficult to get to and access. The 2 orange squares or rectangles on either end, those are the proposed locations for the excavation pits, where they'll actually pull the liner through the existing 24-inch pipe. And then they'll do some connections on either end, but essentially they're gonna pull one of the line to the other and seal it up and then charge it with water. And then it will move into a repair and operation and mode. We are moving from a 24-inch pipe to a slightly smaller diameter pipe, just over 17 inches with the liner solution. The liner does not bond to the interior walls of the pipe. It provides essentially a conduit. So if there is a leak, it will travel back down the pipe towards a pit that they're going to install on the other end so that we can physically inspect and monitor this location moving forward. Next slide. So next steps, as I mentioned, Seattle Public Utilities was able to actually dig down to the pipe. They completed the west side excavation pit late last week. The upper right-hand picture is the actual pipe itself, where they cut into the pipe and were able to put a camera into the pipe. They've passed that footage over to the city, and both agencies are reviewing the footage this week to further gather additional information on the type of break, where it was located, confirming exactly where it's located, and making sure that everything is in order as it appears to be. They do have a liner contractor scheduled for the end of June. Prior to the contractor coming out and lining this pipe, they will also perform a second video inspection just prior to the liner being installed to make sure there's no sharp objects and pipe deformations to cause impacts to the liner, but the contractor is currently tentatively scheduled to be out on site the end of this month. Fingers crossed, we're fully operational by the end of July. As we met with the residents and the community out on the site, obviously as folks were evacuated from their homes and in the dark of night, there's been some significant concern raised about the existing slope around these properties. And so both Seattle Public Utilities and the city's geotechnical teams are developing a monitoring plan and program for this hillside to make sure that the slope is evaluated and assessed moving forward. I will just bring it to the attention of the council and the community that, in the utility and public works world, it is a lot easier to access infrastructure when it is accessible, usually within the roadways. I know it seems maybe a little backwards to be able to dig up a street to get to a pipe, but it is far easier and preferable for ongoing maintenance and replacement when you can access the infrastructure in which you're set to maintain. So no matter what happens with the liner in place for this pipe, which they have an estimated useful life of the liner of approximately 40 to 50 years. However, the pipe remains inaccessible, and the city is in the early stages of exploring some long-term options for relocating this pipe to a different location that is more accessible and perhaps provide some additional benefits to the city and the community down the road. So that'll be part of anticipate that'll be part of the capital discussion later this year, but the early exploration and feasibility analysis is underway now. So before I turn over to Alana, again, just why are we here? Why are we here talking about water conservation? Until the permanent repairs to this pipe are completed, we are currently operating the water system off the emergency backup line, which is that 16-inch pipe that runs down East Mercer Way. It is a smaller pipe and has smaller, our ability to receive water each day is smaller in volume than what is brought via the 24-inch line. Our emergency line or backup water line can reliably provide Mercer Island, the community of Mercer Island with approximately 2.73 million gallons of water per day. As we look at averages, as we approach the summer season, and I know the weather the last 3 days hasn't been very nice. However, the nice summer weather is just around the corner, and as the summer months ramp up, so does our water consumption on Mercer Island. And July tends to be our highest consumption month each and every year. We're exceeding 3 million gallons per day in July. And so when you're only bringing in 2.73 per day and you're putting out just over 3 per day, you're going to continue to draw down your reservoir tanks. When we draw down those 2 reservoir tanks, we have to maintain those levels at an appropriate level above our fire flow and capacity levels. And so that is what we are concerned about, is that we will continue to draw down our tanks to a point where we could be in a critical situation. And so we are asking the community to step up and help with our conservation efforts to just slightly bring down our consumption levels so that we can maintain sort of status quo with our reservoir tanks operationally each and every day. Again, there's some pretty specific nuances with our recharging of the reservoir tanks, but in a nutshell, if we don't have the community conserve water, we're gonna draw our tanks down to a level that's not operable. So it's extremely important that our community help us with this task of water conservation until that main pipeline is repaired. And fingers crossed, we'll hopefully be fully operational by the end of July. Is sort of the estimated timeframe at this point in time. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Alana to talk about specifically our water contingency plan and our reduction actions that we have planned.
Good evening, Council. Alana DeRogatis, the Sustainability Program Analyst. And as Jason mentioned, I'm going to be talking through the water shortage contingency plan and the consumption reduction actions that are outlined in this plan. So in short, the water shortage contingency plan, also referred to as the WSCP, provides guidelines for the city to manage the water supply and consumption in the event of a water shortage that we're facing now. And enables the city to maintain essential public health and safety operations and try to minimize any adverse impacts due to minimized water. So the plan is broken out into 4 stages, 4 response stages: the advisory stage, the voluntary stage, the mandatory stage, and the emergency stage. And these move incrementally, generally, but stages can be skipped in the event of a more severe emergency. In the advisory stage, which is essentially the stage that we are in right now, we are recognizing the potential for a water shortage and the potential to implement supply management actions. As James was mentioning, July is our highest demand month on Mercer Island, and so we are looking at implementing voluntary stage reductions starting this month in anticipation of July. We are hoping that those voluntary actions are well received by the community and well participated in, because we are hoping to avoid mandatory and emergency stages. So just walk a little bit further into the plan on the next slide. This is obviously a very large table with a lot of information, so I just kind of want to focus attention on certain things, starting with the consumption reduction goal. As I mentioned, we're currently in the advisory stage, so there is no consumption reduction goal at this point. There is a subsequent reduction goal range highlighted in each of the stages of the plan, voluntary through emergency. These can vary in the case of a more regional event such as a drought, but generally we're setting a goal on what we're hoping to see consumption reduced by the community. The next thing I'd like to point out is that it's not just the community that's going to be reducing their water use. The city also has its own municipal water shortage contingency plan with its own actions that staff will be taking to minimize operational water use as well. Next, I just want to direct attention to the trigger to transition to mandatory phase. As I mentioned, we are very much hoping that we do not get to that point, but essentially if supply conditions worsen and or the voluntary reduction goal is not achieved, then we would need to look at heading to a mandatory stage of the plan. And finally, this is all based on the actions. So each phase, with the exclusion of the advisory phase, as I mentioned that we're in right now, has associated specific actions that we are requesting of the community to undertake to reduce their consumption. So I'm going to walk through all of those actions, and they were also highlighted in the Exhibit 1 that you received in your agenda bill packet. You will notice that we're going to head into the next slide that the advisory stage has some actions listed. However, these are just general conservation actions, so just kind of general best practices that can be implemented all times of the year, regardless of the presence of a water shortage event. So that's why we're kind of starting with promoting these in the advisory stage. And the full list is in the exhibit, and this is just a snippet of those actions, but wash full loads of laundry, turn off the water while you're brushing your teeth, just kind of general best practices, but are especially poignant at this time as we're looking to potentially ask people to take a further step in their water consumption reduction. So heading into the voluntary actions, so as mentioned, they build on the conservation actions mentioned that we're kind of highlighting in the communications now for the advisory phase. We're really hoping, as I mentioned, for strong participation in the actions in this stage. And again, this is just a snippet of them. The full list is in the exhibit. But essentially, we're looking at irrigation reductions, requesting that community members water 3 times per week maximum and or let the lawn go dormant. Really look at the time of day that you're watering. We're also going to be mentioning specific days of week to water as well. Minimizing pressure washing. The majority of the actions are focused on outdoor use because time of year, that's where the majority of the water is going, although there are also indoor actions where we're recommending reductions as well. So we can take a look at the actions for the mandatory phase, which again, I want to emphasize that we're really hoping to not get to this phase. In the Mercer Island City Code, we have the authority to enforce outdoor actions. Specific ones are highlighted here that are in the mandatory stage that would be enforced, and they also, some of them have potential exemptions for enforcement. That's all outlined in the water shortage contingency plan. This is where we looked at stricter reductions from the community, such as watering only 2 times per week, no pressure washing, and eliminating water features such as decorative fountains and whatnot. So again, this is just a small section of the list, just kind of really highlighting those enforcement activities, which we are hoping to avoid. And finally, the emergency stage. It's just more extreme actions versus the mandatory phase. Some actions that were not enforced in the mandatory phase would be enforced in this stage. Again, there are some exemptions, and it's all outdoor actions that we would be able to enforce. And if we were to get to either the mandatory or the emergency phase, we would come back to council. So that is the overall summary of the water shortage contingency plan. I'm now going to walk through the communications plan that we have outlined for this specific water shortage emergency we're facing right now. There's a few goals for all the communications that the city is going to be sending out as part of this effort. Primarily, the goal is to increase awareness about the need for water conservation and curtailment at this time, to provide direct actions that residents can take to curtail their water use and support the city achieving the water reduction goals that we've set. We're going to be clearly explaining what those steps are and what those actions and how they impact the overall water consumption on the island, and are really hoping to inspire community action and coming together in this time, and confidence that we're going to achieve the goals that we're setting out to. We have a variety of audiences in mind for these communications: the general public, residents, businesses, community groups, schools. We'll be also targeting media outlets, and as I mentioned before, city staff is also going to be participating in this very heavily. So on the next slide, we're just walking through some of those specific actions we're going to be taking as part of the communications around this. We have already posted a Let's Talk page that has the conservation actions that I mentioned that we'd be promoting in the advisory stage. Those are all listed on a Let's Talk page already that has already been promoted in the MI Weekly, and will continue to direct folks there. There's also going to be regular social media postings on these actions and reminders, and further updates in the MI Weekly. We're planning direct outreach to businesses and other community groups to inform them about just making sure that they're aware of the water shortage and what those actions that they would need to take that are maybe more relevant to them. Issue press releases. We're also looking at posting posters around city facilities where the public would be most likely to see them. Especially as we're looking to head into the voluntary stage of this plan, we're looking at deploying a direct mailer to residents so everyone will know that this is coming. We're in the midst of producing a short video message to provide an overview on the water supply and just kind of provide some background and really contextualize more of these asks that we're going to be making of residents. And we're also working, or staff are working on developing a dashboard that provides water system updates so folks can track how we're doing and the progress we're making in result of their actions. And finally here, this is just an overview of the communications plan, essentially breaking out each of the different stages that I mentioned. Right now we're in that first stage, the advisory stage, the different media channels that we'll be focusing on with this outreach. And you'll notice that over time, as you head into the subsequent stages of the plan, particularly those we're hoping to avoid, that the frequency of messaging increases and the different outlets also increases. So with that.
Very good.
Questions?
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Anderl.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who is working on this. I will say that I have a comment and a question, and questions for Jason, but the comment is I'm so confident in this community that we will not have to move past the voluntary stage. I mean, we unfortunately have experiences with water emergencies, but fortunately we know that the community steps up like champs during that time, and I'm already hearing positive feedback about our early communications and people's willingness to, stop power washing now, stop washing their cars now, and which is, of course, something we would only require much further down the road. So I think, I feel really positive about our ability to weather this. But Jason, just a kind of a geeky question. What does the liner look like? How do they get a quarter of a mile of liner to a site like that? I mean, is it rolled? Is it folded? What is it?
That's a great question. So I won't get into the specifics of what the liner is made of because there's a whole technical data sheet on that. But essentially, the liner is a smaller diameter. It's about 6 to 8 inches in circumference as they pull it through a 24-inch pipe, and then as they pull it and it makes the turns and things like that, it'll essentially, when they're done, they will inflate it with just a small amount of air pressure to inflate it. And then it will, they'll start with their connection points and then they'll recharge the water line when it's all set in place. But essentially it's a much smaller diameter, so they can actually pull it through a 24-inch pipe. Other liners that we've used within our system, there's a lot more friction associated to it because they're much tighter and they actually bond to the walls. This is a totally different technology and different application. So essentially, they're gonna pull it through and then inflate it once it's all said and done. That's how they can make the bends and the turns associated with this current location.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Now I'm off mute. Mr. Kintner, can you bring up the slide deck and in particular the map of the straight line map that showed where the repair was going to be done?
I'm gonna ask Elaine to do that. She was the one running the PowerPoint in the background. Give us just 1 second. This
Okay.
the slide you're referring to?
Yes, that's the one perfectly, even though I described it poorly. First off, which direction is north on this map? Can you tell me that?
The lane's pointing to it, the top of the screen. Yep.
The top north. Okay, good. Second question, can you, with your cursor or somehow, show me where 40th stops? Like I see it on the right, but I take it must, in that where the trees are, it doesn't go through all the way through. Is that correct?
Correct. So it essentially stops there at the 95th Court Southeast. There's a little bit of a, yeah, right in there is where it stops. And then there's actually a pedestrian path that carries on through. So there's a set of stairs, and then there's a gravel trail that connects the pedestrian path to the, essentially the Mercerwood section above.
Okay,
But
so my
it really stops at 95th.
Okay, my question, I'm sure there's a good reason for this, or you'd be doing it, but I'm curious what the reason is. I understand you can't get into the ravine to fix things, but why are you starting the path way over there by 97th instead of starting it by 95th?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the council may recall that actually, I believe a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now, Seattle Public Utilities, just east of this current location, so over towards the 96, between 96 and where the access pit liner is being installed, there was already a capital improvement program scheduled, a construction project scheduled for Seattle Public Utilities to replace that section of the pipe. They were actually going to replace it, and so that was actually scheduled for construction next year. That construction project did not include where the current leak is located, and so the length of this pipeline, this liner that's being installed, actually covers both the existing leak, but also the construction project that was scheduled for next year as well. So sort of two projects in one.
Okay, thank you. You probably covered that at some previous meeting and I missed it, but then I'll just make a passing comment that this map and the map you led with were the best ones we've had so far on this. I finally feel like I'm starting to handle where things are. So thank you. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. The first map that we provided is actually in the city's the city's water system plan. So it's actually accessible to everyone. That's actually posted on the website. This map is from Seattle Public Utilities. We'll make sure we get it posted on Let's Talk if it's not there now already.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacobson.
Yes, thanks for the presentation, Mike. I have a question for Jason and a suggestion. My question is, how far was the camera run down that line?
Just about 400 feet. So they actually ran the camera down from the west excavation pit.
Okay.
And they ran it down about 400 feet. And then as you heard me say earlier, when the contractor gets out on site, they'll actually put a camera in the pipe for a second time, and they will run the full length of this pipe the second time. So they ran the first one about 400 feet.
Okay. Then my comment is this, I think how we communicate with the community is very important. First, I think there ought to be, rather than telling people to go look at Let's Talk, we ought to prepare a podcast or a webinar, I don't know how you want to term it, of 15 minutes at most that takes and makes the salient points that what the problem is, what the solution is, and what the implications are for individual households. I also think that any communications to organizations such as churches and others need to be clear and concise. And I admire Exhibit 1 here, but if you give that to people, they're going to throw it away. And because as nice as it is, people aren't going to want to read 5 pages of stuff. But one of the PowerPoint presentations by Alana, one of the slides had what you have to do in voluntary things and what are the key things, irrigation, and not using hoses, et cetera, just a few key points that people will hang on to. And I don't think it's prudent or wise or likely that people are going to go try to search for information. I think that to beat people over the head about this. I've had numerous questions from residents. Well, what is this about? I mean, was this going to replace the pipe? But the real questions are, what do you want people to do? And you're going to have to be very clear and very direct. about that, or we're gonna be going from voluntary to the next, you know, next level of hell on this thing.
Thank you, Councilmember Jacobson. I've been working with our internal and consultant on, internal team and consultant on our communication strategy, and we agree. What we put out needs to be simple, it needs to be focused, and it needs to be action-oriented. So we are really working on making sure that what we're putting out are sound bites and snippets so that it's digestible and it can actually, elicit change. We will continue to send people back to the Let's Talk page who want more comprehensive information, but we are focusing on, regular, small pieces of information that people can do to make change. So, thank you.
Let me just say one other thing. I mentioned this to the city manager. I have a list of about 3,400 email addresses for people on Mercer Island. And I communicate with them periodically about stuff we're doing as a city council. I'm perfectly happy to share that list with the city so that they can have a free whack at that. And that, that, I don't know how good your email lists are, but this one I think is pretty accurate. So you're welcome to it if you want.
Thank you. We can talk about it.
All right, moving on. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, thanks. This is really thoughtful. This is a great plan, and there's obviously a lot of information here. Very well thought out. A couple things to maybe consider. I know that school is winding down, but if you were to tell my first grader that her mission for the summer was to get us to use less water, she would take that very seriously. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to get something to the schools, because I think that this student, especially the younger ones, might be the best police officers here. The other point would be the farmers market. I think would be a great place to do some of the messaging here. It was pouring on Sunday, so it's not quite the right message, but there were a lot of people there. And then Jason's going to laugh at me already, but whatever those boards are that go on the side of the road that kind of light up, they're orange with orange lettering and black background.
The variable message boards.
Exactly. Those seem to catch people's eyes, so just throw those on the plan too.
All right, tons of ideas. I'm going to wrap this up. Councilmember Jacobson, is that a new hand, old hand? Okay, not seeing anything else. We're going to move on to other business in the planning schedule. Welcome, City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening again, City Council. Quite a few agenda items tonight. Thank you for your great feedback. I'll just remind you our next meeting is June 18th. We are excited to be celebrating our Community Members of the Year that evening. That will be right at the top of the night, so letting you know so you can plan ahead. Let's see, we've added, since we published the packet, we've added another agenda item to June 18th. We covered that with you previously. It's related to the Island Crestway project. I may have a couple items moving, but I won't go into detail on that now. July 2nd, I understand we may be without one or two council members. Just like to confirm that tonight. We did poll you on your availability. We couldn't find an alternative date, so we're going forward on July 2nd. And then looking ahead at August, I'll just remind you that it is still our intent to take an August recess. And so at a future meeting, we'll be amending, asking you to pass a motion to formally cancel those meetings. And that is all I have for you this evening.
Thank you. All right, good segue. Who's not going to be here July 2nd? Councilmember Weicker? Anyone else? Councilmember Jacobson? Looks like we got everybody else, so 5 and 2. Councilmember reports. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum, anything to report?
No, just that farmers market kicked off on Sunday. It was great, even though it was pouring rain. Encourage everyone to come out.
Perfect. I was able to attend Friendship Circle on Sunday along with Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum. Great program, lots to learn, and exciting to see them having so much engagement at the community center. Councilmember Weicker.
I'll just say thanks for coming to the AWC conference, the 18th to the 20th of June. And for those of you that can't come, I bet you can get the content online or from staff. It's lots and lots of good information.
All right, Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, so I attended the General Assembly meeting of the Puget Sound Regional Council on May 30th. And in addition to the regular business of approving the PRC's budget for the coming year, the PRC Executive Director, Josh Brown, gave the Assembly a refresher on the federal Safe Streets for All, or SS4A program, and the grants that cities like us can get for projects to develop safe roads, safe road usage, and safe speeds, and improved post-crash care. And as discussed in our discussion of the TIP this evening, City of Mercer Island is already leveraging $320,000 of the SS4A grant funding to develop a comprehensive safety action plan and our pedestrian and bicycle facilities plan. And so when it comes to actually implementing that plan, the SS4A will be there and ready to help again.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
I just, to make a note that I've been not able to attend in person, but a number of their meetings. I've been in contact with the Mercer Island Moms, the Moms Against Gun Violence, something like things that in front of blankets lay them in the East Coast time zone today. And an upcoming farmers market, and they've been cooperating with the Mercer Island Police Department. They'll be handing out gun safety locks for free to island residents. So everybody that needs one, please show up so you can get one.
Okay, Councilmember Anderall.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Jacobson.
I attended a Sophia Way presentation of what they do, and I emailed the materials we focused on to members of the council. They have some very interesting ways of attacking homelessness, and their focus is to get people in and then get them able to stand on their own 2 feet and move into the community productively. And that's their goal, and they have a pretty good track record according to what they say.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing those. The next hybrid meeting of the City Council is scheduled for Tuesday, June 18, 2024 at 5 p.m. The time is now 8:22 p.m. The City Council will go into executive session for approximately 90 minutes to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood or increased price pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101B, and to review the performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101G. No action will be taken following the executive session. As a reminder to council, please stay seated until the city staff terminate the broadcast. Thank you for joining us tonight.